back in order.
Madam
Can you hear me?
President,
Yes.
we're ready? We're back in session?
Yes, back in session.
All right. I move that we amend the agenda of, to add a personnel item to change titles.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Okay. Mr. Superintendent?
What to specifically say, just tell us. Yes. So the superintendent is recommending that the current position of assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction change to deputy superintendent.
Madam President,
Yes.
I so move that we change the title from assistant superintendent to deputy superintendent.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Now we're on to employment of personnel.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, superintendent recommends 3.1, action item 3.1, which is the employment of personnel, as stated on the agenda.
Madam President,
Yes.
I move that we accept the employment of personnel item as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Madam President, members of our board. Action item 3.2 is the Summer Learning Loss Program standard rates of pay. And this is an addendum from the original rate of pay that you originally approved, I think, a month ago. And Mr. Smith, if you are Executive Director of Human Resources, will just point out where that addendum changes and if there's any discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Paluski, members of the board. We bring a small change to you in our standard rates of pay for our 2021 Learning Loss Summer Program. Due to the volume, we feel that there's a need to have a secretary position within there. It's highlighted in red. We've labeled it as $20 an hour and for the equivalent of 6 hours a day. And I ask that you guys approve 3.2.
Madam President,
Yes.
I so move that we accept the 2021 Learning Loss Summer Program with the change of the secretary to $20 an hour.
Second.
Oh, sorry. My bad. Go ahead.
Oh, this funding, although it's a raise, is it standard that we've used previously in summer school program?
No, ma'am. So due to the volume we have this year, there's never been a secretary within the summer program. And so this has been an addition due to us expanding across all sites. Me and Mr. Brown got together. We figured out what we felt a comparable rate of pay would be for that work in that position. And we talked about it as an executive team, and this is the conclusion we came to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Any other questions? Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay. So we move to
Madam
the-
Chair, I move that we adjourn and move into our workshop.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes, ma'am.
Aye. Motion carried. Okay.
Madam President and members of our board, I want to welcome a very special guest, which is Mr. Eric White, who is an ASBA consultant, but is also the president of Bentonville Area School District. And I'd also like to recognize Dr. Butcher from ASBA of being with us this evening, and certainly at the request of our board members. And in our professional development, one of the things that we wanted to work on. So I want to thank Dr. Butcher for her support and leading us to Mr. White. So welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. This is good. You can hear me?
I think
Yes.
you have
Gave a thumbs up.
Oh, good. All right. All right. Thank you for the time tonight. And you know, I've had the opportunity, and it's been a privilege to spend some time with a number of school boards across the state, both in person and on the phone and Zoom calls. We've all done those this last year. But let me just recognize that it's particularly for me an honor to be here in front of this board. When you think about the challenges school boards have faced in our country, this board has had a history of making really good but hard decisions and leading the way. So I'm particularly honored to be in your chamber tonight. And let me look just to make sure. Now, I couldn't find it either. I didn't bring the book with all the answers. I looked everywhere. I don't have all the answers. What I hope to do tonight is to just facilitate a discussion. I'm happy to share the recent and historic battle scars that I carry from sitting on the school board, and maybe it'll be helpful. But if we just jump into what works for you, and maybe some viewpoints from me about how I see it, and maybe that ingrains into how you see it, and we'll find a good path forward. I think tonight's the beginning, not the end. So not to set your expectations, but the rubric doesn't end tonight. Won't leave with a finalized plan, but hopefully the discussion's good for you. Now, you were presented some material, and I promised no death by PowerPoint. Dr. P was very clear on that. And so no death by PowerPoint. And Dr. Butcher is here to proctor me, in case you were wondering. I know she's taking notes back there. I'm a little nervous myself, actually, so help me along. Smiles would be good. Just laugh at something sort of funny, it's helpful. But but the material that you have, there is a deck that was passed out, but there's also a Word document, a PDF file that has a lot of information on it. I'm not going to read that to you tonight. It's for you to take and read and consider. I think you'll find it useful as you continue to deliberate. But Superintendent and I spent a few minutes on the phone and an hour on Zoom call talking about what could be helpful for your board. What could I bring you that would be helpful? And so we talked a lot about parliamentary procedure, and you'll now like me more because I said I'm not boring them with parliamentary procedure. We're just not going to do that. Robert's Rules of Order is a very thick book that no one's read for a reason. It's very boring. The truth is that school boards need a sliver of that, right? We need to understand a little bit of it, and we'll talk about the whys. Why does that matter? How is it helpful? But the entirety of the book only matters when a school board's not really working effectively. When we don't communicate effectively as a school board, we end up going to point of order, point of contention, and when you see that, you'll see it a lot online. And boy, don't Google, don't YouTube school board meetings in today's environment. It's tough out there for people. A lot of it's around masks. That's not on the agenda tonight. But it is tough right now to sit in your chair and make good decisions. But I will say what can help you do that is when you know you're sitting with 6 other board members that you may not totally agree with, and that's okay, but you know how to effectively communicate with. And parliamentary procedure can facilitate that. If nothing else, it's a common language. So let's jump into the PowerPoint. Now, I will refer to that PDF document as we go through. Feel free, I know you're going to read whatever you're going to read anyway. Just feel free to dive in there and stop me at any time, because I do not have an hour and a half worth of talking, I promise you. So let's have a conversation back and forth. But I started with, kind of what's your reveille? What brings North Little Rock School Board to the point where you really want to, thank you, sir. Dr. Poor will be happy with your organizational effectiveness. What brings your school board to the point that you really want to stop and say, how do we get better at being a school board? You could call it professional development, and we all hear that. We hear that stuff at ASBA meetings. We all go to new board member training. We do all those things, and we hear that professional development's important, but it's also important to develop ourselves and work together so that we can more effectively just get through the tough issues that are coming. So the reveille is a little bit of military nod and a little patriotic nod, but what's the wake-up call, so to speak? What gets you out of bed to come here and say, let's figure out how to be a more effective school board? New superintendent coming in. Have you been throwing things at each other? I looked at a couple of your past meetings. I didn't see anybody throwing anything at each other. It wasn't anything like that. The glass prevents it now. Huh? Does anybody have a suggestion? What's kind of the prompt? What are you thinking is a good reason to just new board members? Nothing?
I'm new.
I saw that. Welcome. Congratulations. Condolences. And not to this board, any school board, not to this board. That's not what I meant. But it is a challenge, and so I'll offer my suggestions. I think it's good. We do exercises as a board that are, everything's important, but there are some that are really important. And I would argue something like your facilities plan, your 10-year strategic plan. Those are really important things, right? I'd argue that this is a really important thing to undertake. We did that in Bentonville my first year on the board. We undertook an initiative sort of like this where we said, one, how do we communicate with one another better, and therefore communicate with our superintendent, who was brand new at the time because our old superintendent bailed and is now his boss down in Little Rock. And he's the, yeah, good for them. He's a great guy. But, and so how do we do that? But by proxy, then, how does the community see this board as a governing body to be more effective? And we all know that there's the attendance here tonight, that's the attendance at a school board meeting, unless there's something really controversial. Unless something's come up, this is it. So our parents, our constituents, the people in our community, the taxpayers, all don't really know how a school board operates. And so we thought, as you watch us, you're gonna get a sense of the effectiveness of this school board. So our superintendent actually had it as a goal for her in the first year to improve communication between the board and the superintendent, between the board and the presenters that come from the district, and then from the board and how we acted as we jumped out into the community, and how did we stay in our effective lane. That's kind of a really tough conversation a lot of times for board members. I have a lane, I'm an elected official, I don't have a lane. Well, you have a lane that if you stay in, you're gonna be much more effective. You can jump out of it, but you're also gonna feel the ramifications of that. So I suggest maybe for you, the Reveille is what it was for us, which is, we're good, let's just be great. Let's just figure out how to be even better. And I think with a new superintendent, it is a great time. How I think you can do that is kind of slide one here. Becoming excellent, it's really about your culture, and you have a unique culture in your school district. You have a new superintendent who's gonna create culture in the leadership staff, the way the administration, their expectations inside of each building. You know that's cultural, but you also know that your board has a culture of its own. And that culture on the school board has to be nurtured. It has to be given some life. It has to be given some effort. And most head shaking's coming from Ms. Temple, the president. I know that role. That's a tough job. It's hard to facilitate the meeting and think about the meeting as well, the content of the meeting. It's a tough job, but let's start with what's our shared vision of what excellence looks like. And this has gotta be the participatory part. Yeah, somebody's gotta have it. But I think we can talk about what are the characteristics of an excellent school board. Good communication, handles issues that are easy and difficult with the same level of attention. But the second bullet there is, what are the visible behaviors that determine a school board being effective? Like, what does the community see? And we do have, you didn't have public comments tonight. It might be because it's a special board meeting. Same with us. We usually don't have public comments unless there's a topic. We have one meeting a month that's a regular meeting, and then once a quarter we do a workshop. We don't always keep the workshop, but we have it scheduled. But there's parents that come and they want to express themselves. That's like one parent or two or five even. We have 19,000 kids in the district, and we have a whole lot of people paying taxes that all care at different levels. So if they were to watch the school board, somebody help me here, what are the visible behaviors of an effective school board? Like, what would they see? Thank you, sir.
Of an effective school board?
Yep.
Well, I mean, the first one is understanding how to run a meeting. And if it looks like you know how to run a meeting, you have automatic, you start off in a good place, regardless of the decisions you make. And so, running an effective meeting looks good, and it looks like you know what you're doing, whether you do or you don't.
Is really interesting that we could dive into that topic for a long time just on effective school board meetings, because there's no playbook. Like, you didn't, on the day of election, you didn't put your hand in the Bible, sign the oath, swear in, and get the meeting effectiveness book. That's the same place that my answer book is for you tonight. It doesn't exist, but I think it is about the interaction and the effectiveness of a board meeting. And I kind of call that the language of a school board. We speak the same language. You get into a pace If you were to watch our school board meeting, you hear me use the same words very often between motions and requesting a motion and getting a second, and just that pace makes people comfortable, but it also makes sure we don't miss steps. Like if it's missed, it feels like I missed something and somebody will correct me. But you all are students as well of education and probably of business too, because we all come from outside the education system. Ms. Dorothy, I know you spent a long time in it. And I wore my bluest blue tonight. This is as colorful a suit jacket as I have, just because I knew I'd see you. But Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we could talk about being an effective board, having an effective meeting. We could talk about it all night long. But it's really, what's the culture? What's the climate when you come in? Is there tension between board members? Is there tension ahead of the meeting because there's a particular topic on the agenda? And we'll talk about some of the ways that I've seen that it helped to diffuse that. I'm not saying there shouldn't be debate. Debate is absolutely healthy. But how do you do that in an effective way so that when someone's looking at it from the outside, they think that's a bright group of people. They really care. I understand he thinks differently than she does, but I understand both their points. And so how are they going to vote? How are they going to decide? Culture is seen in patterns of behavior, shared beliefs, values, and assumptions. It's kind of what we do every day that demonstrates culture. We talked through, I got one note here, how to run a meeting. Running a meeting effectively is one way to demonstrate to the community that it's an effective school board. Are there any other thoughts?
Putting the kids first, no political agendas. That's a big thing for me. Don't come on the board with a political agenda when you need to put all children first, not just some.
Yeah, I love
So that's
that.
a big thing for me.
I love that, and that's really well said. And since we're family, I'm killing the code. You know, it's that in-between time in Arkansas where it feels like it's 100 to me. When you weigh almost 300 pounds, it happens a lot, but it feels like it's 100 degrees out. I love what you said. It's hard as a school board member because you're not active in campaigns for seats that are coming up. You kind of grit your teeth and know if this person wins, they're bringing a single issue, and that's going to be where they stay for a long time, and that's challenging. Having the ability, I would just paraphrase what you said to expand it beyond the political aspect. It's an apolitical board. We know we don't run with political affiliation into a school board. It's easier said than done. It was even easier in 2019. It got even harder in 2020 because everything became political.
True.
My mask became political. I'm just trying to keep a virus from getting in my face, and it became political. We all know that that's the environment we're in, but maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago with the proliferation of social media, we experienced it even more, right?
Yep.
Where's the line between my personal social media and my school board social media, and there is no line. We know that's exactly it. I would expand that a little more to say, just to include, how do we put things to bed as a school board? Once we've decided an issue, how does that issue go night-night for a long period of time until it can come up again? That's okay, but how do we be effective about it? And there are some great suggestions that we can discuss on that. I'm going to bounce all over without input, so you're better off talking to me than not, because I won't stick to the slides. But knowing that you have voted on an issue, one of the hardest things that for me to learn as a school board member, and especially becoming president, and I'll give you a real life example, it just recently happened, was having an opinion where I voted one way, the board voted another, and I'm going to leave the room and support the board's decision. That's a skill set. I mean, that takes conscious effort. I have to make up my mind. And you know how I do that? I listen to the other side. I have to listen. I have to really hear, why do you feel that way? I can still not agree with you, but I do have to be able to articulate your points because the board voted that way. And you will see so many problems, I call it self-inflicted wounds, if you don't do that. If you say, I'm not voting for this new scoreboard because I don't think we need to spend the money, because I don't think it's the right thing, I'd rather spend it on curriculum than football, that's a great point. The board decides now's the time to spend it. When your constituents ask you about that, you can certainly say, I had a different opinion, but you ought to be able to say, here's why the rest of the board thought that same way. and I'm going to support the board's decision. You ought to challenge yourself to be able to articulate, and you do that when you listen closely. Just listen to what they're saying. Every board member on here, we all get one vote, not two. President doesn't get three. Sometimes I'd like three so we can end it quickly, but we can't. We get one vote, and we're a team. That helps to speak to the cultural aspects of building the trust and relationships with one another that I think will become so important. And thank you for contributing. I'm going to recognize contribution where it is. I will.
Did you want to say something?
I do. I want to go back when you first started about the communication on the board, because when I first came on the board, I mean, that was like, nobody can talk. You're
Right.
only supposed to talk right here.
Right.
Well, there's conversation. You can't hardly, there's
Right.
just, that's hard. So it's very hard to facilitate communication on the level that you're talking about when this is the only place you're supposed to have a conversation and you're supposed to conduct business. And
Yep.
so I'm asking you, how do y'all do that at your school board?
We struggle the same way you do, but I think one thing is talking about it, recognizing and reinforcing both with the board members and with the public that the way the laws are written, the Sunshine Law prohibits us from having a conversation. Now, I can go have coffee with another school board member. However, you're almost always counseled against that, right? Because even if you're talking about your kids' academics, people are still going to assume you're talking and you're trying to, have a school board meeting, and it's really not true, but it does make it extremely difficult. We have, it manifests itself in a few ways. Y'all ever get emails from the community that goes to the entire board? Right, so now who's going to respond, right? Like, I generally, for a new board member, I say my rule is if somebody sends an email to the entire board, I'm not going to respond. If they send it to me, then I'm going to respond every single time, even if I say I'm not going to tell you or I don't know, I'm going to respond. That's just how I choose, but you can choose however you want. But so I think this is an important topic to help speak to your question, because the community doesn't understand. Like, why isn't anyone answering? No one's even responded to the email. Well, because we can't talk, right? Like, we can't have a phone call, quick conference call, let's all get on the same page here. What are we going to say about this? Can't be done. So for me then, as the president, I took, with the agreement of the board, and we're still working through it, but with the agreement of the board, the spokesperson role. And so a repetitive email, the same email comes in 2 days, 3 days in a row, I will respond back to the entire group. So the rest of the board knows I responded, but I just have to be very careful because I can't speak for them if we haven't been in the meeting. But I think understanding the challenges that you have and being open here in the board meeting with those challenges, and there may be a few techniques that we use that might be useful to you. We do have a time, call it open mic, really dangerous to call it that, but we do have sort of an open board member comment section where we can share. We have board members that are particularly skilled at reminding people that outside of here we have not talked about this topic before. Facilitating debate is really important too. If you have a board member that's not participating, go grab them. Well, what are you thinking here? Bring them into the conversation, and just remind everyone this is your spot to weigh in. Straw polls are valuable. They can be dangerous, but I think they're valuable. How are you feeling about this topic at this time? There's no way around the sunshine laws, and to the degree that you can keep yourselves from emailing back and forth, like when the superintendent sends out an email, hey, communicating out, do you do it weekly, sir?
I do it a lot of different ways.
Okay.
Yeah, so we do a weekly board report.
Yeah,
They
so
get
you got a weekly board report. There's something cool on there. It is so tempting to respond back with a question. And board members do that, respond back, well, hey, I don't really understand that. Well, now we're actually conducting business because he's going to try to respond to it. And so you got to just constantly remind everyone. They keep electing me president, so they can't be too mad at me, but they do get aggravated with the reminder interrupting those email strings that say, guys, let's not do this on this email string. Let's hold this for session. And when we talk about setting the agenda, that could be something that enters my mind as we really need this on the agenda. We really need to have an opportunity to talk about it. Another temptation is to have that conversation in executive session. And we all know what executive session's allowed for and what it's not allowed for, but it's so easy to spill over. And so it helps. You have a lot of like positions, dispersing officer, vice president, president, parliamentarian, well said, parliamentarian, secretary, board member. So that's wisdom. The parliamentarian is the wisdom of the group. But so you just kind of got to have that voice of reason that reminds you in executive session, not executive session material. Yes, ma'am.
You just made a statement about open board comments.
Yes, ma'am.
I know we have public comments, that's for the public.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you saying that it's allowable, as, this is in reference to Ms. Temple's question, that we not able to talk to each other,
Yep.
but are you saying in your board meetings that there is actually an opportunity maybe where board members would like to comment about something? Is that policy, Dr. Butcher?
I don't know what your policy is, and he would be the better one to ask. I mean, you can have that in policy as part of the.
Well, I guess the question I was asking, can we make that policy? Can we make it?
Let me just broaden the answer a little bit. Now, I'm not evading it at all, but it's in context to the meeting itself.
Okay.
So deciding what goes on an agenda is probably the most important thing you can do to make sure every board member feels included in the conversation. Because if you have a topic that you want discussed and it never ends up on an agenda, how frustrated are you going to be after a few months? You're going to wonder, why can't that get on there? And so the way in which you create an agenda is probably the single most important starting point for an effective meeting. And board members need to know they can bring the president, if you're setting the agenda, probably with a meeting once a month with the superintendent where you finalize the agenda and then it gets published out 48 hours, 72 hours in advance of the meeting, all that. Board members need to feel comfortable they're going to have the opportunity to put it on there. And if you don't agree it should be on there, then you have as brief a discussion as you can about that, and then it will go to this second comment that I'm making about the way in which we wrap our meetings. So we'll have, and superintendents hate this, so Dr. P, I apologize in advance. I would prefer that all the action items be grouped together with all the informational items, just because it's easier to run a meeting, but we don't ever get there. And it's okay, because the flow makes sense, more sense of who's coming up to present. But I like action items, so I know. But so once the board agenda for the meeting is set, then we'll flow through the same things you did here. We kind of have an opening. We do the Pledge of Allegiance every time. We do roll call. If parliamentary procedure, do you finalize old business? We have a consent agenda. Be careful about what goes on the consent agenda, what doesn't, but it's usually really self-evident. So we'll close out that, and then we'll move to action items in our agenda. And we'll flow through all the action items, which is presentation. And let me insert here, because I've totally blown this presentation flow. Let me just insert here that this is where the language I talked about is so important, because it gives comfort to the other board members. I say the same thing every time so that we effectively get a motion on the table in a second before there are any questions. And it's no fault. You have a question, you want to ask it, but they know to hear my voice first. So when the speaker is done talking, I'll say, this comes as a recommendation to the board from the district. I'll entertain a motion. I may say I'll entertain a motion to approve if that's what their recommendation was. But what can help you even further with that, Dr. P, is as your presenters, especially if you're asking for approval or something, read their motion that they want as the last thing they say. Therefore, I'm bringing to you, I'm asking the board to approve the hiring for this. That probably won't come up, but I'm asking the board to approve the GMP for this building this evening of X number of dollars. So it's read into record, and then I don't have to worry about reading it, but sometimes I do. It's written on our agenda, and I'll read the motion. I'll ask for a motion, and then I'll state actually motion by. And if you want to be formal, Mr., Ms., Doctor, or you can say your first name, it's however your culture allows. But by doing that, I know they're capturing the motion and second stuff that I need to have eventually. If somebody asks who moved, who seconded it. So then, is there a second? And I'll say seconded by Joe. And now, are there any questions or comments? So that pace, that language gives the board comfort to say now is the time to ask questions. And as we dive into that a little bit, I know there are topics that are confusing. They're going to present like 3 things, and there's 10 questions on the first part, 10 questions on the second part. My suggestion to you from a parliamentary standpoint is, if it is complex and confusing, just maybe it comes as 2 motions, or maybe you suspend your normal rules with a formal motion to allow questions prior to a motion. Either way, you're just documenting what you've done. We all know lawyers are, there's no lawyers on here tonight. Lawyers they do what they do, and so challenging the validity of an action by a school board can come down to, was there an active motion and was there a second? And so just be mindful that you do that in a way that can't be questioned. And so sometimes we do suspend the normal protocol through formal motion. This is like the last slide. We're already there. But we do suspend the protocol with a motion to ask questions and engage prior to a motion. So motion second, all in favor. You do a voice roll call. We do an individual roll call. That's not required either way. It's got to be clear that the outcome was. And the suggestion could be with a voice roll call, you just, either the secretary or yourself, ma'am, you just say the motion carries 6-0, 6-1, just to voice into the record one more time that there wasn't background noise, and I thought I heard everybody say no. Well, only one person said no. But then as we work through the action items on the agenda, and we have public recognition, public comments up front, the last thing we have on our agenda is board comments. Now, if you decide to do that, my suggestion is you agree as a group, the way those board comments are handled is, let's try to stay positive. Let's try to say, I went to a choir event this last week, and it was the most beautiful music, and I'm so proud of our performing arts teachers, and we've just really come a long way. But that doesn't prohibit you from saying at that time, this is where our board members have, to your question, the opportunity to say, on a future agenda, I'd like to hear this topic discussed. That's the spot for it. That's the part it's formally read into the record. I'm now, as the president, formally on notice that there's a board member that wants to talk about returfing the softball field because they've gotten 100 emails and they happen to be in the zone where that school is. So they have a responsibility to their constituents to voice that opinion. They got to do it. They formally told me that they're requesting it to be on an agenda, and I do my best then to rationalize what makes sense there for the agenda. We're not going to talk about something 2 years from now at our very next board meeting, but rationalize it. And it has worked effectively for us for a couple years. The board has agreed and lived up to the agreement that staying positive in those comments, but it gives you an opportunity individually to express what you liked, what you're challenged with, and then future agenda topics that you'd like to see. And by the way, during that, it's okay to have back and forth. It's okay to have some discussion during that. There's no rule prohibiting discussion. You can even ask a question. I'd like to hear more, Mr. Superintendent, about this thing that you did last week. It wasn't on the agenda, and I'd like you to talk about it. That's awesome. So that's one way that we ensure the agenda is agreed upon by all. Everyone has input. I think one critical mistake that many school boards make is not having a way for people to effectively put something on. They just relegate that entirely to the president. And it feels like after a month or 2 or 3 on the board, it feels like I have no voice. I have no way to talk about the issues that I really want to talk about. So what am I going to do as a responsible board member? I'm going to interrupt the meeting in the middle of it and make a motion out of left field, which you can do at any time, and hope I get a second on it. And now we're in the middle of an off-agenda topic, which is never a good sign. It's not going to work out. Even if the decision is what you wanted it to, too many of those has that, back to the first point we made, the look of dysfunction to the community. That wasn't what I thought they were talking about. I would have tuned in if I knew you were going to talk about that tonight, but you didn't. So thank you for the question. I hope I answered, at least gave you a little bit of guidance. So plan to become excellent. I don't think you're going to do this by accident. I don't think you're going to improve your communication. I don't think you're going to improve your perception. And I don't think you're going to feel better about one another with your trust levels unless you intentionally do it. So my encouragement is write it down. It doesn't have to be complicated. I promise you I did not bring a template to fill out tonight with 6 pages of stuff. I don't think that's it. I think you create it and you talk about it and you set aside some time with suggestions next time. And it's really maybe 3 things. It's not 10. If it's 10, that's too many. And I think that will be helpful for you. And then when you hold one another accountable, the way in which you do that is meaningful, because it is okay to correct another board member during an open meeting if there is a parliamentary error, correct the president if you didn't get a motion. It's okay, but how you do that is really important. It builds trust in community. Now, there is a study, I will tell you, if you want to research it, that there's an organization out of Mississippi that has spent a lot of time, and I went to a tri-state meeting a few years ago and saw the presenter, and he was excellent, former superintendent, now does work with boards on being effective, that he theorized and then proved through some level of data, so it's no longer a hypothesis, that an effective school board has a direct impact on academic achievement in schools. So that's a really striking, how do you get from the board being good to students learning more? Well, I think when you walk that path step by step, you can see it. Because if you're talking about teacher pay, and they're out there, if you're going to talk about teacher pay, your teachers will be out there, and they see a board member roll their eyes at, this is coming up again, that's what they see, then that translates to their how they feel about the district. That translates to what gets talked about in a teacher's lounge. They don't gossip. I spent some time as a police officer, and I would argue that when you see 2 squad cars doing this, apologize, sir. We see 2 squad cars doing this, they're not talking about the latest speeding ticket. They're talking about their sergeant or their corporal or whatever. That's what's happening. But in a teacher's lounge, it's really similar, right? I mean, that's where people just, the water cooler talk, they express themselves. Man, if it's about the school board, that can't be good news, right? Unless it's just to say how great they are, but that's usually not the conversation. So my point is, if you step into how the employees in your school district feel about the school board, how they perceive you feel about your superintendent and the leadership decisions, how they feel that you're going to support their issues is going to translate directly to when they come to work every day. Are they thinking about their resume and looking for another job? Or are they thinking about teaching those kids? And so it's not a far stretch to say an effective school board has an impact on academic achievement. I do think that it's really aspirational. It's you know, we're not teaching, but it is something to think about and consider. And you can look up the studies because it was pretty dramatic. But how do you tell a dysfunctional school board? You can see it, you can feel it, but you can't really, there's not data around it. So
That just kind of proves in what you were saying when we had our meeting with Dr. Davis, and you were saying you ran for the school board because of all the stupidity that was going on. So that just confirms what was being said right there.
Yep.
So yeah, definitely. And then also we set the tone and the expectation. So again, when there's political agendas out there and you see that and you feel that, and the city sees that,
Yep.
and they're angry and they're mad and they want to hurt people because of it, then you have a whole nother level that comes to the school district.
Yep.
Because of illegal behavior or possibly because of criminal mischief because of the political agenda. So it brings multiple things, and it brings the entire school district down. And then there's morale with the teachers, just like what you said. You know, whether it's bathroom talk or fountain talk, it doesn't matter. Teachers are upset. Teachers
Right.
are sad of what's going on and what's being said. And
Right.
here we, the leaders, are failing
Right.
them. So I can see the correspondence with that as well. Definitely.
That's well said. I think it's a really tough responsibility, and it's not a normal skill set we get in our careers.
No.
It's not something that comes naturally to humans, but understanding how to truly, I guess the quote is, the sign of an educated mind is to entertain a conversation without agreeing with it.
Yeah.
So having the ability to really listen to other perspectives and then articulate, I hear you, I know what you're saying, I feel you, here's my decision and why. And then the collective school board decision as well. It really does go a long way with the city, the municipality, the other agencies that are out there. Your relationship with the mayor and with the city council, all of that matters. They look at you and look at the meeting the same as you look at their meeting and say, are you kidding me? You guys are just going on
Absolutely.
and on
And it's,
on.
to me, it's just kind of a trickle effect because our perception or attitudes can flow to other, entities. And of course, people talk about it in their homes. So now the students are in their homes, so they're thinking, my school is crap, my school district's crap, when it's not.
Right.
But you kind of have to, I'm a firm believer that you don't have to entertain or show up to every argument that you're invited to. You just don't. So, you can be respectful, you can be mindful of a situation and keep it moving.
Right. Yeah, ultimately, somebody said it earlier, it's about the kids, right?
Right.
And there's going to be decisions that are made that are in the best interest of the kids as a collective judgment of the board.
Right.
That not every individual is going to agree with, not every individual board member is going to agree with, but the board does. And I think if you're committed to the fact that 7 minds are better than one,
Sure.
and you can learn and you can grow from other conversations, I think as long as you stay committed to that, it should be part of your development plan, your communications plan, and maybe even how you flow through the meeting.
The gentleman you mentioned is Dr. David Lee.
Oh, yeah.
And he's out of the University of Southern Mississippi, and he is wonderful. We've had him come for several things, and I hope we're able to have him back for our annual conference in December in person. So you all watch for him. He's excellent.
I just put
He's
Mississippi,
so
but Dr.
easy to
David Blair.
understand, and he makes good sense, and he's easy to listen to. So
Super down-to-earth guy. I don't know if I'd say easy to understand. He is from South Mississippi, so if you don't, I get criticized when I'm in New York for this. Just imagine, he is a great guy, really brilliant, I think, at what he does. His heart is in it. So I think if the starting point, we've talked about the behaviors you want to exhibit. I think my challenge to you is document those. Figure that out. If you want to change the flow of your board meetings practice, just try it out. And we're going to dive in a little bit more there, so it's documented for you, and it's also on that Word document. But you go back to what the school board is and what it isn't. And I think the lanes that we talked about earlier that are really hard to put yourself in, we at New School Board Member Institute, you get elected, congratulations, you got to go to this training. I think you spend an entire day hearing what you shouldn't do most of the time. Now they're good, there's no criticism of ASBA, but there are a lot of things that are so new, you got to hear what you can't do. But I think you stay focused in your board on what you can do, right? And so remember what you are, you're publicly elected officials, and your main goal, I know it's about the kids, I get that, but you have the vast majority of your constituent base that are taxpayers don't have kids in your district. So you're spending their money. And so you're in place to oversee the taxpayer money that in almost every municipality is the single most expensive thing in that local tax base is the school system. And then it's followed by roads and police and fire and other things, but usually education outweighs it all. So primarily remember that you're here to make sure the dollars are being spent for the best of the kids. So the dollars part is really important. You don't make a more important decision than hiring and evaluating the superintendent. You just don't. And that's your single point of contact into the system that is a school district, is the superintendent. So if you ever find yourself doing anything other than telling a principal how great they are or commenting on something they've done, if you get into the weeds with a principal, that's the caution flag that goes up into your head. I need to bring this to the superintendent, because otherwise you'll end up here, your communication flow is now off. can you believe what the principal at this school said? Dr. P, I have no idea that any of that happened, flow through both publicly with constituents and especially with employees. And then take your role as a community liaison really seriously. We're elected by, you're a zone district, you're elected into zones. So same with us, but you represent the entirety of the school district. But oftentimes, because you ran for election, those folks in the zone are gonna come to you. Just recognize that you're the spokesperson for them, and how you communicate back is really important. I mentioned being able to say the board's perspective, even when it doesn't 100% align with your own, critical. But another good best practice might be the best writer on the board, and you have one, or two or three really good writers. If you get a really good email back to a constituent about a question, Dr. P, that you just think they kind of hit on all the points. You hit on the role of a school board member is, because nobody understands that. Thank you for reaching out. Understand, and I'm going to make sure the superintendent has this information. The school board's role, and then explain that. If you find one that's particularly good, share that out with the rest of the board. Share that out. Just get and there is no shame in copy paste. Just be a little bit precise in making sure you don't send Miss Annabelle one email labeled for Bill, because you won't win much trust when you do that. But there's nothing wrong with grabbing that language and just sharing best practice with one another. I think that's really important. But you got to take that role as a community liaison pretty seriously. I got to burn through now. You know this about being a legal entity only with a quorum and in legal session. So you don't have any legal authority or supervisory authority when you're outside of this building, outside of this convened session. And explain that. Explaining that helps you remember it and process it. Because our administrators, it's not there, but they want to impress you. They want you to see good things. They want to show you things. You got a kid in the school, they might invite you in. Handle that like you would. I mean, it's fine to go see that, but give Dr. P the heads up that Principal so-and-so invited me in and she was so proud of this thing that they did. And by the way, it's really cool. Post it on social media, all that stuff. But just keep that in the back of your mind, because the way I look at it is I have 6 other partners on the school board that didn't get to just see what I saw. And they're entitled to it too. They should see it. They should know what I saw. So I jump, because this is kind of what jams up a school board more often than anything. Because in our daily work, in our profession, we have to understand why something happens so that we can understand why it should happen or why it did happen, so we can understand how it should happen or how it will happen. As a school board, you're sitting back looking at the results. That's it, not the how. The how is superintendent's challenge. How did you do that? How did you hire all those good teachers? How did you change our RTI program? How did you dive into the student achievement? Why are our MAP tests up? All of that is great fodder for a school board meeting where he can explain it to you, but you're just looking at the outcome. An effective school board member that stays with results is going to find much more effective. I'm not going through this because I know you know this, but it's documented for you. I do want to hit on a point we talked about earlier, because I'd love to get some more feedback on your perspective here. If you look at communication in general, you could, according to these statistics, you could mute this school board meeting and get almost 90%-ish, be 92% of the tone of the meeting with no audio. And we don't assume that very often, right? We just don't think that way. Unless you're a professional interrogator, you're really not, if you're a parent, you are a professional interrogator, by the way. I mean, how easy is it to tell your kids lying? You know, they don't even have to open their mouth. You're gonna lie. I have 2 girls, so my girls are particularly skilled at the art of manipulating dad. That happens. But so if you really dig into this science that says most of communication is nonverbal, and it's how you look and act, and we don't think about that. You know, I have prescription glasses, and you've seen me take them on and off a few times. I hate getting old because I can't see anything anymore. I used to be able to see. But even the way you wear your glasses sometimes and you put them on the end of your nose and you look down at someone, you're giving off a nonverbal cue that's really saying, I'm smarter than you, or I'm doubting what you're saying. And I'm not. I'm looking over my glasses. But I have to be aware when I'm on stage at a school board meeting that my nonverbal cues are really important to people that are watching in. And given that, knowing that, on top of it, the sunshine laws that don't allow us to communicate with one another, we're gonna infer our perceptions of one another while we're in this room. That's it. That's it. We're gonna infer our perceptions of one another. I have learned so much interacting with school board members, and I have realized most of the time, well, again, I told you I had girls, so girls and a wife. I knew this already. Most of the time I'm wrong, right? And if I have any doubts, I just go home and I'll be explained the reason by my English teacher, now counselor wife, why I'm wrong. But what you find is most of the time your assumptions aren't accurate about what someone else is thinking. And when you place those on and you create that expectation, even with a board member that you don't agree with on a topic or two or three, you're creating a lens by which you're going to look through that person at every single time. And it's a challenge and something you should always do, to pull yourself away, clear your lenses, listen to the words they're saying, the passion in their voice, and just hear it. The sign of brilliance is being able to entertain an idea without agreeing with it. I'm going to entertain everything you're saying, and I'm not going to interrupt you, which is another really key skill set, right? I watched a couple of your meetings. It's been hard this last year with Zoom, and Zoom's impossible because you end up interrupting people, or you're all silent for a while. Are you on mute? Somebody on mute? So they're really hard. But in an interpersonal meeting like this, if you can guard against answering the question in your head before you speak, so I'm just waiting for you to pause so I can get my, look, I work with a lot of guys out of New York. If you're not prepared to jump in, as soon as there's a breath taking, you're not getting in that conversation. But that speech pattern is kind of, it's unique, it's geographical. You get down south and it's a little bit different, but be guarded against doing that here. Let somebody complete their thought. Before you answer, even if you have your thoughts together, explore their thoughts further. There's nothing wrong with effective debate, saying, I kind of hear what you're saying, explain that a little more. By doing that, you'll create more effective communicators. And we don't all come with skills of communicating. We really don't. One tip each of you could take away if it applies is, if you're not, as a normal practice in your job, communicating really quickly with people, like I've always said, kindergartners, what is their attention span, like 30 seconds, something like that? Maybe it's a minute. But as you grow older, your attention span grows. And then you go into the corporate world, and as you go up the ladder, you go back to kindergarten. An executive or a CEO of a company has a 30-second attention span. So if you're not in the world where you're communicating in these short bursts all the time, it's hard to gauge how long am I going to be talking. Like, I'm only talking a lot tonight because y'all aren't. You jump in and I'll quit talking. But if you can help yourself by understanding, what do I want to say? What's the point I want to make? I'm going to maybe give an example to reinforce that point, but give yourself some verbal cues too. A great way to do that, and if you don't remember anything about that conversation or you want to research it, one great way to do that is to infuse in your language, and just to wrap up, just to put a point, emphasis on that point, because I've just given my verbal cue to my own brain that says, you just talked for 3 minutes. Everybody got it. They got it. Just say one more thing and then go on. And in facilitating the conversation, language, again, that gets everyone comfortable is really important. Have you ever had a topic where everybody just goes on? I mean, the topic just goes, you already said that. You said it in a different way. Now she's saying the same thing. You're looking at the clock going, this is a record. We're going to be here, world record. You can't go past midnight, or you're going to have a brand new board meeting because it's a new day. But if you've ever been in that situation, one way you can help go through that as a president, and it feels awkward at first, but everyone will get it after a while, you can say, is there anything new? Does anyone have anything that hasn't been said before? I understand everything that's been said, all good points. Is there anything new in the agenda? And now it's kind of a joke on our board, because when they hear me say that, they're like, yeah, he's trying to get us. I'm not trying to quell discussion, as long as it's new. I've already heard, 1, 2, 3, 4. I've already got that. So the way I look at it as president is, we used to have 2 meetings a month. We used to have a pre-agenda meeting and then the regular meeting. And as a board member, it's awesome. What that means is no homework. All right? I don't ever have to read my board packet. We're going to talk about it all, and I'm going to get to ask all the questions. I don't have to do my homework. But what I was doing was, those folks that are out there, it's not parents, it's Dr. P's staff is sitting out here. They need to be home with their family. They don't need to be at another school board meeting. Let's do our homework. Let's come prepared with questions. If that works for you, I'm not saying you can't do it or shouldn't do it, but for us, what I found was, we were having a meeting out of convenience, and it was hard. There's still board members that would argue, if they watch this on video, they'll still argue that I liked the 2 meetings a month, because we got more in depth into discussion, and the presentations could get a little deeper. And I get that. I understand that. But I've got principals, I've got staff, they've got basketball games, they got football, they got maybe one night a week they get to be home, and I'm putting them here in this board meeting, and they are not having fun. I'm just telling you, they're not having fun. They're listening, but it's just not, it's not where they would probably rather be. So if you could be more effective by moving conversations along in a productive way, and that's verbal cues, that's language of love, that's language we all speak. It's saying things that it is common and people know. Parliamentary procedure is a helpful tool, but don't rely on it. So if you find yourself, if you ever watch a school board meeting where they are deaf on parliamentary procedure, like they call for the board to recognize them, and they say, Ms. Pearson West, you are recognized by the chair to speak. I think you're wasting your time on a school board meeting to do that. But if you have no structure, then you have chaos. So I think there's a balance in between those two things. And when you have a 30-member committee at the state Capitol building down here, they probably need to have the chair recognize you to speak and establish time. You can do all that. You can say our debate is limited to 2 minutes per person. But I think you'll find those are used in school board meetings when you can't do it a better way. There's a better way, and that's just open communication. So I think the tip sheet that I get, again, I'm not going to read through it, but I really think that'll help you. I'm skipping this slide totally.
I have a question.
Yes, Doctor.
Because I have ADD, so
Yes,
I
ma'am.
kind of, to stay focused, I kind of skipped a little bit ahead.
I know you
But
did.
you were,
I saw you reading. Go ahead.
because you were talking about parliamentary procedure, and you did write on here, which one of the things I did not know, that a member making a motion, it's important to understand that the chair has the same privilege to make motions as any other board member unless your bylaws specifically say otherwise.
Ma'am.
So that means anybody, all 7 of us,
Yes, ma'am.
any of us can make a motion.
Yes, ma'am, at any time. Now, here's my guidance there. If the agenda has been effectively set up, and everyone agrees that these are the topics we should talk about, there's probably not going to be a reason to make a motion. Outside of the fact, and we'll get to the presentation part of it here in a little bit, but you can call for a vote. In other words, the debate's gone on and on forever, and you tried a couple of techniques. I moved a call for the vote. You can do that. Now, you get a second to that. There is discussion on that, and then if it passes, this move to call, discussion's over. You're calling for the vote. That's generally the time that you would interrupt with a motion. Now, you can. The other thing on the president making motions, I just don't. All right, this is the other thing I do, and you might call it a presidential privilege, but I think it's more influence. I usually don't weigh in with my perspective until I'm sure everyone's had a chance to weigh in. I don't want to step on anyone's perception by giving mine first, because the outsider looking in is just like, well, that Eric guy, he just runs over the whole meeting. He just tells everyone, here's what we're about to think, and we haven't even had a chance to talk about it yet. So although allowable for the president to, I think generally you probably want to solicit motions from the other board members and get into that comfortable pace. I'll entertain a motion. And by the way, as a president, that's kind of how you control the flow of the board meeting, you just ask for it. That's kind of the tip, ask for it. We need a break. I'll entertain a motion for recess, because you know everybody's thinking about it, they just haven't thought to make a motion. We're gonna take a break. I'll entertain emotions. If you need something, you entertain adjournment. Bad idea unless there's chaos, but you can ask for what you want. The other board, and then you'll find out where the other board members stand on that particular topic. I think that that's important. Asking the right questions is the key skill for a board member, and I'm gonna breeze through this because I do wanna make sure we have some time at the end. It's all this on here. Let me just go basic parliamentary procedure, and there's a little bit deeper. It's maybe 301 on the document. Well, this is 101. There may be a 201. It's maybe 301 on the document. But I do think understanding parliamentary procedure at this level is important. For any action item, non-informational, there has to be it should always flow in this order. Motion, second, discussion, and then the vote, right? And generally, the discussion concludes naturally. Or the president will say, are there any other comments or questions? This is our language. I'll say, are there any other questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Lees, our secretary, would you call the roll, please? So we call the roll. Mr. White, how do you, actually, the president's last, but I would say, you know, Mr. Quinn, yes or no? And then that's how we vote. You vote by voice, both acceptable. But the motion and second is, the two tips were, put it on the action item from the presenter. Here's what I'm asking the board to do, so it's read clearly. Ask for a motion, and then it helps sometimes to recognize who the motion came from. For the record, I think I mentioned that, but then ask for a second. And then just say, is there any discussion? Are there any questions or comments for the presenter, for the deputy superintendent, for the finance director? Is there a CFO? Is that who you have, CFO? Is there any questions for the CFO on the financial report?
So,
And then-
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Just to clarify, it's not this board, I've been on a lot of boards that flip this, but a lot of boards tend to have discussion, then they make a motion, and they immediately go to a vote. That's backwards, right? We
It is
really shouldn't have discussion until we have a motion that's good and legit.
Yes, sir. If it's an action item by the board, you need to have a motion and a second for the discussion before the vote.
Okay.
So technically, that discussion isn't, if you have it first, unless you suspend the rules because of the complex topic that you have, it's a rarity, or you separate the topics a little bit further, just call for a motion. If you're doing your homework, which you're listening here, you're writing down your questions as you go, so you just hit them all. But you do need a motion a second, which brings up the point, it can be uncomfortable. Like, what if this is, what do I move? Do I move a yes or do I move a no? Well, you know what? It kind of doesn't matter. You need a motion on the floor to have the discussion. So jump in. If the president open calls for a motion, jump in. I say, I move we approve this item. Is there a second? So if nobody agrees with you, there's not going to be a second, and then what happens? The motion fails for lack of second. Now I'm back to the president saying, is there a motion? Is there a motion? So it's kind of obvious the motion better be the other way, because unless just nobody wants to talk, it's either a yes or a no most of the time. So just put it in. I think that's, you'll lead that as the president. I think you'll lead that by jumping in to start with, calling for it. And again, up to you. Sometimes I'll entertain a motion to approve. Sometimes I'll say I entertain a motion. If it's our financial report, we get it every month, I'm gonna say I'll entertain a motion to approve this month's financial report. But if it's an open debate item, then I'll just entertain a motion without influencing which way I might vote. Here is the couple of scenarios. This is the 101 version of scenario. There's a motion, you get no second. We talked about what that is. So you need an amended motion. You can go back to the person. Really good point on parliamentary procedure. If we have a successful motion, a successful second, we get into discussion. The motion isn't quite right. now that I understand the topic a little bit better, I didn't mean 3 days. I meant 3 days before X, or I meant 3 days with these caveats, or I meant 1 day, whatever it is. In order to effectively change that motion, you got to go back to the person who made the motion and ask for an amended motion. I think you can do that. It's open still. And go back to Ms. Temple, you made a motion. Would you like to amend your motion? Nope, I want my motion where it is. Oh, crap, now I got to deal with it. Okay, so, but everyone will get it. But usually, and then don't forget this step. You need the person who seconded it to then second the new motion. And then what I do as a rule, every time, if there is confusion around the motion, or you get somebody that says, so moved. How often do you get that? So moved. So moved what? Like, exactly what did you just move? So moved yes, so moved no. Ma'am, I was not, that's from our board, not you, for sure.
We have a stickler. She'll get on us.
Good, good. How you clear that up is just read the motion. So I have a motion to approve the GMP for the new junior high at 14.5. That's why if it's written on the paper, that's why it's so easy. Is that right? That's your motion? Yes, sir. Can I get a second? Now there's no question what it was. And then if you call roll, which I guess you don't, you just ask for a voice call. But it is an opportunity at the end if you've had a ton of discussion and you kind of forgot what the motion was. Our board secretary will say, we have a motion to approve, and sometimes even read that again. So we're all back on the same page because we kicked it around for 10 minutes and we're back on the same page. So if there is a good motion, a good second, everybody understands it, you have discussion, you have the tips and tactics to move the discussion along, any new information that you want to include. Is there any other comment? Pull out board members that have been silent if you so choose. If they're silent for a reason, you know it, and that is discretionary. But pull out people, include pregnant pause is awesome, right? Just, if there are any other questions or comments, just let them sit on it. Let the board just kind of stew on it for a minute. I gave you plenty of time. You didn't say anything. Just let it, just pause for a minute, and then call the motion. So the other caveat here is those times that's illustrated on this graph. There are those times where the discussion just can't end, and you've tried every technique you could, and you just got one. Sir, I got one more point I'd like to make in this discussion. It's the same as what he made a minute ago, but I'm just going to say it again because I want to make sure. I'm going to say it. So if you can't end that, and it's happened on our board very rarely, but it's kind of best to let it diffuse. It's kind of best to use the techniques of, is there anything new? You had another comment? We don't formally recognize, and I noticed that you didn't, at least tonight, or the ones I saw, you don't formally give permission. You can set time limits if you get there. It's okay, it's allowable, but you can call the vote. Just I move to call the vote. Second, you'll get a really fast second from somebody else who's also equally agitated.
Rochelle, she's our quick
You
jump.
do not have to have the floor to call the vote,
You do
right?
not.
You
You
can
can-
say, I call the vote, and if you get a second, it moves.
Parliamentary rule, it's
Right.
like a point of order. I can interrupt in the middle, point of order. Now, the parliamentary officer, which is the president running the meeting, has to recognize that, and if they don't, they're actually, now you're moved to point of order. Madam President, I made a motion, and you have to listen to it.
As you said, it's best to avoid that, but if something goes down the rabbit hole, that's your way out.
That is your way out.
Yep.
And I think you all seem like nice people. I think this is gonna be easier rather than harder. I've seen it be harder, and this is not what harder looks like, I don't think, but I think you'll get there through the means of, is there anything new? We've talked this through a lot. I understand the perspectives. Is there anything else that this board should consider prior to making a decision? I think that'll do it, but you can call the vote, which is a vote. Remember, I said this before, but it is a vote on its own. It is a vote that requires discussion. I call the vote. Second, are there any questions or comments? I think we've covered all of this topic. I want to go, no ma'am, I want more time. Okay, I hear you. You can vote that way. So you call the vote roll, or You say, all in favor, aye. Passes, we're calling the vote. Now we're back to, we have an active motion and a second on the floor, calling that vote. There's a motion that passed. It's pretty simple, but I guess brush through the document. This is the last slide in the deck, and we made it here.
Question, I know I'm not part of the meeting, but let me ask.
Yes, you are, you're taking score. Gotta get at least a
On
B.
the previous slide, when you talked about amending the motion,
Yes, ma'am.
do you have to take the original motion to vote and cancel it and then go back? So you can do that after the discussion, but who initiates having somebody amend it? Is the person who made the motion, or do you as president say, are you interested in amending that? How does that happen?
Yeah, it has to come back to the board member who made the motion. So that board member has to amend that motion in order for it to be amended. If they refuse to amend it, then you have an active motion and a second on the floor, you gotta deal with it. You gotta run it all the way through. You can vote it down and now retake the discussion. Do I hear a new motion? It almost always happens when there's just some little part of it that didn't come out right in the initial motion, and it happens more often when it's not written down, but it will almost always be, the motion, I'll amend the motion that our calendar has these, we don't have snow days anymore, so we can talk about them. We have our first snow day on the calendar year is whatever, Memorial Day. So you can amend that motion. The president generally calls the person who made the motion. Don't forget to go back to the second. But again, if there's a refusal to amend the motion, nope, I said what I said, and that's the motion I want to keep, you just got to run that one all the way through. The rest of the board, just think about what that means, because what it means is there's probably another motion coming right after it that's going to clarify. So even if you liked everything about that except the one piece you wanted them to clarify, vote it down, and then come back and address it again. But I don't.
So, I mean, what you're describing, I call a friendly amendment, right? The original person who made the motion and the person who seconded is accepting it. But we can't, there's not a mechanism for us to force a vote on an amendment. It either has to be accepted by the original person who made the motion, so we only have friendly amendments.
You could argue later that the majority of the board didn't agree with that, and so I made a motion to amend the motion, and you may get in, it may be a harder position to defend than, because that board member made a motion. And
Right.
they are entitled to that motion.
Okay.
And when someone seconded it, they put it active in front of you. So to take away that board member's right to have made that motion by taking action from the board is what would be called into question later on anyways.
I guess you're going to get your chance to do that when you actually vote on the motion, and then
That's right.
another motion can be made if it fails.
That's right.
Okay.
And that can be part of your discussion, because I'm going to vote no on this because it's not stated the right way, and I'm planning on making another motion. There's nothing wrong with saying that, so everyone knows. It's part of discussion. So here's where we are, wrapping up. Hot, long. I've talked way too much, ma'am. I'm sorry. I tried my best. Here's the challenge for you. Excellence in North Little Rock School Board. Same questions. What are the characteristics you want your culture? What are they? And I think we know. We want an effective, communicative debate. We want healthy agreement, disagreement. We want healthy conversation. We want people to see that visible behavior, knowing that most of it is nonverbal. Some of it is going to be verbal. You can't reel back in. New board members learn this at some point. You can't reel those, you can't put that back in. Once it's out, it's out. If you make a mistake, guess what's going to be played on social media? The clip, right? That's it. You said it. Even if you contexted it afterward, you still said it. So, but what are the visible things? So my suggestion is you break these down into the 3 points that they are, 1 or 2 items that you agree to. Now, there is a creative way to do this. You could create an agreement, a board agreement, that says, here's how we're going to act, here's how we're going to interact, here's what we're going to do. And you could have each one of you sign it like you do your kids when they join the basketball team. I'm not going to screw up. It's a contract with a coach. I'm going to follow the rules. And then when they screw up, the coach says, these were the rules. You signed right here. It's how we teach kids to live up to their word. You could do that. I've seen boards do that. We did not do that. We just came to a more informal agreement and then remind one another of our goals and objectives. But it's a great time to just document, what do you want to say? How are you going to hold one another accountable with familiar language? Not, you said that 5 times. I'm done with listening. It's not helping anybody, right? It's just not going to. You're not going to be happy with it. I'm going to wish I didn't say it. So familiar language that moves the conversation along and builds trust with one another. So I know I just plunk those down, and then 3 months from now, 2 months from now, your next board workshop, dust that off a little bit. Say, how are we doing? How did we do? And I know you got to do it in public. So it's hard. It's hard. It's a public meeting. There's people watching us right now. It's going to be hard to do. But we can, I think, dusting it off and saying, how are we tracking is good. I think, Dr. P, if you consider bigger, broader relationship type things in your objectives, that allows you the opportunity to report back to the board, how are we doing?
Yes.
And we understand that, jumping into a individual school and asking for a tour when you're picking up your kid, we know that's harmful to our partnership on the board. We know that. So when it happens, you're going to have to get called out for it. How I would handle it is I call myself out for it. If I screwed that up, I would call myself out and say, I got sucked in. My apologies. I shouldn't have done that. I called superintendent right after I left the building and realized I got sucked in. My apologies. That would be, you would know then that, hey, we've checked these boxes. This board is communicating well, we're being effective. But I think you have to believe in your heart first that doing that is bad. If you don't believe that, then you're going to do it. So if you don't believe me right now, tell me why. We'll talk about it. I'm not telling you what to do. Y'all were elected to these seats, not me. I have to go 3.5 hours, 3 hours back north before I get into danger zone for me. But except for this will be played, I'm sure.
So I have a follow-up question.
Absolutely.
So in the event that, say I mess up,
Yep.
I don't apologize.
Mm-hmm.
They don't call me out on it.
All right.
What's the reprimand?
The same outcome is when you tell your kid to do their homework and then you don't check up, they don't do their homework, nothing happened. That spiral is going to happen on the board. So I
But
think
it hasn't yet. We're 6 years in.
I think you got to do the braver thing. I'm not saying you're not brave, but
Yep.
I think you got to just say, let whatever has happened in the past,
Yep.
just let it live there. It doesn't really, it isn't going to affect, it isn't going to do anything but bring negative into the future. So let that go and say, as of today, new day.
Yep.
And then if it happens, you say, wait a second, we all shook our heads
Yep.
and said today was a new day. What happened there? And it's a very delicate balance, because if you get on the preacher's pulpit and do too much of that, you're not helping the situation, right? And you know that.
Glass house.
But you got to call it out.
Yeah.
Right? You do have to say, we had, so COVID, we couldn't do any school visits, right? Non-essential personnel, we couldn't do any school visits.
Yeah.
We have a brand new elementary school. We got this awesome principal there. She wanted so bad for the board to come and visit. When you do your school visits, I assume you schedule them, invite everyone at the same time. That's the way to do it. And this principal wanted to say, and she grabbed her zone board member. I got to show you all this good stuff we're doing. And so we did have to have that conversation. And boy, that board member, I mean, this person knew right away, but it wasn't, the intent wasn't bad. It was, I didn't think before I
Sure.
acted. I didn't realize. And my point was, every other board member would have absolutely loved to be in that school too. What made you special that day? I get it. Hey, hang on, everybody's going to get to go. And then the other thing is the message to parents. Parents can't come in. PTO can't come in. They really want to be there folding Tuesday folders and doing all their stuff. We're saying no, and here you go traipsing into a building. So I do think it's an accountability with one another, and do it in a very positive way until it can't be positive anymore. The point it can't be positive, then I think you become very clear with the communication and concise. Because I honestly, it doesn't do any good to lecture a school board member. It
It goes
is
in
just
one
eating
ear and
up
out
time.
the other.
So just be clear and concise. We agreed.
Yep.
We didn't live up to it.
Yep.
But again, I think the little things like that, the gotchas, the little things we worry about, they go away over time.
Yeah.
I rewind time to a bit of a war story where we had a really tough debate over, we built a second high school, and Mike Poore, don't mention Bentonville Second High School to him at all. He has PTSD, literally, over the second high school, because it was a freshman center, and you're going to divide up the sports teams. Oh my gosh, you know that everything. So, but we built the school, and in order to get the millage passed, we had to cut out a lot of things out of that school. We just had to trim it down. Before I got there, they did it. They got it passed. We built the second high school. We didn't finish a lot of things, and so now they got to be finished, right? And so there was an argument to say, well, they can share a football field and alternate Friday nights and play on it. Now, clearly, there's two sides to that story. And had we built a neutral football field to begin with, I would have agreed with it, because it's a neutral site. They do that in big school districts in Dallas all the time.
Yeah.
Neutral site, it doesn't, but to rebrand that, to co-brand that school, I've now, in my opinion, I took away the high school whose stadium that's been forever. I took that away from them. I co-branded it with the other high school, and now I've spent a third of the money I need to just finish the things out here I needed. So it was a better, in my mind, it was a better option. Now, there was debate, split board decision. We went ahead and did it. And I was overly aggravated with board members that argued against me. I was overly aggravated. I was disappointed. Like, how can you not see this the way I do? It was my first year on the board. I learned, well, there's a whole other opinion, because they're listening to other people. They have a different perspective. If I relived that whole scenario now, I would have voted the exact same way, but the grace I would have extended in my mind would have been much different.
Yeah.
I would have been a better listener, and I would have done things. Now, the guard against is, when you leave here and you voted against it, president's on the hook for the press that might be here, right? That's just the job. You got to go out. Really hard thing. I'll give you another story in 1 second, and I know you're done with stories, but you have to guard against getting home and posting on social media. Well, dang it, I heard you people, but I lost, because there will be a phone call from a reporter that says, tell me why. Tell me why your board didn't agree with you, because that's what they do. And they're looking to try to get the facts out. Again, nobody attends the school board meeting, so they don't know. And now you find one board member in the paper with a perspective, another board member, now do I counter that? We voted differently than that? None of that's helpful. It's not back to what's best for the kids. That's not best for the kids. If your school board is in the newspaper, you're doing something wrong. If your school district's in the newspaper, you're doing something right. If they're talking about what you guys are doing, then you got to check something. You got to just go back and say, what do I do? The other quick story was we just had the mask discussion, and our governor ends the mask mandate. He did not give us till the end of the school year to do that, to remove the air cover. So now the school board's got to make a decision. Do you extend or not? And boy, can you fire up some folks in today's climate about whether you wear masks or not. Again, politics, shouldn't be. But we had a 6-1 vote. We extended our masks until the end of the school year. I voted to do that. I believe that was the right thing to do. But had masks alone been the topic, I may have voted differently. I may have said, I want all these other things. I want to do graduation. I want to do prom. I want to do all these other things the task force recommended. But I'd end masks today. That could have been my thinking. But that wasn't the motion in front of me. So I voted the way I voted. I got done. We had to take a break because it was a really long debate. I got done. I'm like, one of the board members said, we need a break. Take a break. I walk out, and there's the reporter, who now I have to switch. I've made 5 minutes of impassioned pleas about one perspective, and here comes the microphone, and I got to switch hats. Now I got to be the school board president, not Eric, the board member, who had an opinion, and I had to say all the good things about why it was, and it was the right decision for our community. And that's the hard part. And so just challenge yourself to be able to do that, and don't put yourself in the position of being contrary to other board members, especially on social media. There's a flyer that I gave you that talks about Coca-Cola as a brand. You have a brand. Your board is a brand, and it's really important brand. I gave you some social media tips, do's and don'ts, because I really think social media is the one evil that gets more school boards in trouble than anything. Social media, it is really tough to navigate today. And it's usually not what you say, by the way. It's usually what you forward or you retweet or you comment on that it looked good to you. You're not a normal person. You don't get the grace of saying, oh, I didn't read that whole article before I sent it on. I didn't know at the end of it they said children should be locked in the closet when they act up. I didn't see that part. You don't get that grace. So I just want to make some time here at the end as we're wrapping for you. I hope you got some valuable insight. I know I bounced all over, but I'm blaming, it's 50-50, your fault and my fault. But I hope that you got something out of it. I really hope you'll commit to just having some really high-level board improvement techniques. And I'd offer the invitation for me to come back and visit with you again and pick my brain, and I'll try to stay on track next time a little more. But what questions do you have that didn't get addressed or answered?
I guess the only one that I have would probably, which we didn't delve into a whole lot, would be like the social media. How do you handle a situation if you find yourself in a situation where you feel like you're being bullied,
Yep.
possibly, and you have to make sure, and I try to make sure that I extend grace when
Yes.
I deal with each individual, because I try to put out in the atmosphere what I would want back in return.
Yeah.
And I try to make that a conscious decision, and I try to watch, my facial expressions. I try to focus in and make sure that I at least look pleasant in the face and that I'm engaging. And how do you handle that situation to where it's not appearing to be confrontational, but you just want to get an understanding as adults?
You're not alone. The only way to avoid social media altogether is to completely stay off it. Think how hard it is for me to have a pleasant face compared to you. It's easy. You smile and everybody knows that you're engaged. I look like I just, I'm here to bounce at the door. It's hard for me to overcome, which has been a blessing for me. But here's my advice with social media. If you have an effective communications director, then make him or her more effective. Make him or her more effective by directing social media to the district social media sites. Conversation should happen on the district site, not on your individual board member site. So that to the degree you get a question, a comment, something on social media, it's a hot topic. If it hasn't been commented on by the district, it could be intentional. They don't want to comment on it. You collectively don't want to comment on it. Dr. P might have said not the right time to comment on it, but try to move the debate off from your platform onto the district platform so everyone can see it. You'll do that, and you know this about social media. You do that by communicating, forwarding district communication. Forward it, tweet it, retweet it, whatever it is. Comment on that string. Try to move it over, or you'll have people in the community create their own talk sites, chat site about your board, and the conversation's going to happen there. They're
We
going
already
to have
have
the
that.
conversation. In those cases, I just stay out of that conversation. I'm not going to win in that. They're angry and they want to vent, and they're probably a limited audience anyway. So I think the key to winning the social media strategy is if you feel like you have a great communications director, then what are you giving him or her to make them even greater? And if you if you have somebody with split duties, or you can, it is so important today. The communications director, they are the everything. Something bad happens, they got to comment on it immediately. You have a lockdown in the building, you have the police show up, fire department show up. That's a really hot school bus go off the road because of the rain, anything. All that's got to happen on the social media of the school district, not you. Hard, because some board members want to be the first out with the news, and it can be really tough, but try to move it to the district communications platform. Dr. P, if there is a topic that's burning, have him send you the line. What is the district going to communicate? And then repost that on your site with a direction to go to North Little Rock School District, whatever, Twitter, or I don't know which, Facebook's probably the
Right.
most popular. Facebook site. Go there for more information. Go to our website for the official version. Go away. You're not sending people into cyberspace.
Right.
You're directing them to get the information, but they're going to get the same information that his Twitter feed's going to get and her Twitter feed's going to get. They're going to get the one version of the truth, which is so important. And it's just hard to do. I'm not telling you have to, but that's my recommendation, is try to keep all of that off. The other temptation will be chat boards on some site where you see mistruths labeled on there. If you have a really great communications director and it's not your line of work, it's not what you do, spend some time, maybe even have them come and present to you as a board, or individually spend some time with the communications director, if Dr. P allows it, to just understand, why do you make the decision to not weigh in versus weigh in? Because some sleeping dogs are best left lie. Sometimes the right decision is no response. And a communications person knows that intuitively. They'll know, look, this is a small group of people. All I'm going to do is take gasoline over to those little embers. I'm going to dump it on there if I comment. So although it's hard to read something that's untrue and not respond to it, oftentimes that's the best choice. And as long as you're making eyes-open decisions, be the right choice. It's right personally, too. That's why I tell my kids about social media. It's like, pick up the phone, call some. You do not
Right.
have 2,000 friends. You do not. You don't know 2,000 people. You don't know 2,000 people. Nor do I want you to. Let me see that phone. I got daughters. We'll go through that list. So, yeah, communications director in today's world is critical. So, what else? I got a question.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much, because we really are striving to improve, and you've given us a lot of really valuable information.
Thank you. I hope so. I certainly enjoyed you. Like I said, y'all are nice people, so I think this is not going to be a hard
Yes,
lift
we
for
are.
you. Yes, I know, and I got a photo. So I'm
Mr.
happy.
White, I equally just want to say thank you. I really appreciate the dialogue with you and Dr. Butcher and planning this evening. And yes, sir, I definitely, I think we all would love to have you back for some follow-up, and maybe I'll get some ideas or topics from board members based upon this, and we can tailor our own PD together based upon that. And to that, I just wanted to add a couple things for board members that I took a lot of things away from this. I think some things for us to suggest. I love the idea of open board meeting member comments. We could add that in on a regular board meeting at the end and just give anybody the opportunity. I really like that idea. We do have, Mr. White, we did add superintendent and community member and board member community involvement.
I heard
So-
that at
so-
the beginning of your board meetings. Yes.
So it allows everybody to talk about what they've been doing in the
Yep.
community, but it doesn't specifically get to your point, which is there something you want to talk about? Is there something you want to openly have on the next agenda, or can you look into this for us
Yep.
openly versus, they're always coming individually, which is great, but I think that's and I do love the idea, maybe that's something we could practice is an open roll call vote by individual and have Ms. Colquitt. To your point, it gets clear as to what is the vote, 5-0, 6-0. So those are just two suggestions as I'm thinking about moving forward and things we could add on. But there are many other things. I mean, I love all the suggestions and communication, and I took a lot away from this. So I just want to thank you.
Yes,
Oh.
ma'am.
Back to Ms. Temple's question. I would like to say, I didn't hear you address this, but whenever board members previously ever had concerns about anything, you know, they'd talk to the superintendent, and then they'd say, I would like this item on the agenda. That way, it's a certain flow. Because I understand some folk, you open the mic for them, they want to talk forever. And as long as we can keep things clean, and maybe you need to put 2 minutes or something behind that. Because being honest, I think, I hear what Dr. Paluski is saying, but the most effective way that we have always handled issues, if there were things we needed to discuss, Ms. Temple, we always come to the superintendent and ask him, this is something I think that we need to address as a board. And we put it on the agenda. That way, it keeps, it's more professional.
Yep.
You know, rather than everybody hoopla and talking about, because you don't know what the issue's going to be.
Sure.
But when it's on the agenda and it's specified, we'll know what the conversation is going to be.
Yep.
But otherwise, you coming in, I don't know what you're going to talk about. You could be talking about your children. I don't want to hear that. So my thought would be, in hearing what Dr. Paluski and whatever he so desires, he can do it. But my thought would be the way we've always done it previously. If there is a concern about a board member, a board member has, we go to the superintendent and say, we would like to have this on the agenda.
Sure.
Then the board member and the superintendent discuss the warrant, the merit of what want to be done. And then that way, it's point blank, we know what it is, we don't have to have any surprises. That just, but I didn't hear you address that part.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, that was left out.
Miss Dorothy, I apologize for missing that. That's a good point. You know, I'll just expand on that a little bit. Another good best practice, Dr. Paluski, is you get all the communication from individual board members. However, certain board members won't know other board members have communicated with you. At times, you can have one board member that's very interactive with you, asking a ton of questions, and other board members that are less high maintenance. And so a good leveling tool for that is if you go to respond to an individual board member because they've asked you questions, copy every board member. And then you can crank the dial up a little bit by saying, Mr. White asked for this information. I'm providing it to the entire board member. Well, if you send 3 of those emails a week, Mr. White asked for it, I've got to see that I'm probably not focusing. What I'm doing is making my busy life your really busy life. That's what I'm doing. I'm pinging you. So you'll have different, to Ms. Dorothy's point, you'll have different board members kind of require and ask different. And as long as you're comfortable with all of that, keep doing it. Some board members want a weekly phone call with the superintendent if you can make time. But I think it's important for board members to know, just like I said with the meeting where you have folks in here, Dr. P's trying to do the right thing, running the school district, and if you can't take a note and consolidate those into, you know, maybe less than 3 times a week, then that's the challenge might be for you to help. How do you better communicate with him? But I think that becomes clearer when you don't send any one individual board member an answer, send them all. And it's really the right thing to do anyway, because every board member should know the president is no more important than the vice president or the secretary. There are no more authorities. So I really try to limit my time to pre-agenda meetings, and then we do take advantage of, we're going to go visit a school. Well, the press knows we're there. It's legal for us to be there. It's a great time to walk the hall with the superintendent and just have a conversation. So encourage you all to do that.
Can I just say?
Areas, and they all know this, but I'm just gonna say it out loud, is if he sends out something to all the board members, remember, you don't need to be replying back and start a discussion, because that's an illegal meeting. So he can send that out to you.
Well,
all, but then that really-
I was just gonna say, I like this process that you've been doing, which is when you send out something to all the board members, you ask if we have a specific question that we can direct it to you specifically.
Individually.
Individually. I like it because just out of the shame, I don't want to ask, did it say keep the tone conversational? And the other board members is like, didn't she know that?
Right.
So I like the idea that that's what he does, that if I have a question and I just need some clarity,
Yep.
I respond to him directly,
Yep.
and he responds back directly, so I have that clarity.
And that's keeping it legal too.
Yes.
That's where we
Versus
start. It's-
sending that part out saying, well, Dr. Retta said she wanted to know, does the do's and don'ts say this?
Right.
Then I'm embarrassed.
Right.
So I like the way,
Because it starts out with,
That-
do not reply all to this email, and this is for information only, and if you have a specific question, just contact me individually.
Exactly.
and I love it, and
I-
he respond. I can ask whatever I want to ask
Yep.
in,
I think,
in any
uh,
way, and then he can respond back.
And he always say, Dr. Redd, she had this answer and I'm giving it to the board. He answers everything. I don't know when he has the time, but he does. He communicates
Well,
excellent.
well.
You don't, no doubt, no doubt. You don't have to think about anything.
I think you restated what my intent better than I did. I didn't mean for every communication. I meant for the board member that's asking a different question every day,
Gotcha.
not necessarily on the response.
I
But
gotcha.
you restated it better. I totally agree with you. I think you just have to remember there's 7 of you and 1 of him.
Mm-hmm.
And if it is something that you absolutely have to know, then can I give you a call?
Hey, good superintendent,
Give you a
maybe
call.
you don't have any problem.
Get a good superintendent, life gets a whole lot easier for a school
Yes,
board.
it is.
That is the one thing you do, is hire and evaluate the superintendent.
My phone has decreased on the ringing and the text messages since Dr. Paluski has come into the school district. I will say that. So
Great.
that's a great thing for me because it's opened up more time for my family.
It's
So
great.
that's been nice.
It's great, and when the phone's ringing and emails blown up and it's from constituents, you'll also narrow that as you begin to just educate and acclimate them. The information's available on the website. You get those emails from a parent who's mad baseball playing
You can
time,
get
or
those.
English teacher, the way they're teaching. As you condition
Summer
people and
school.
educate them, there's an effective chain of command. Like, have you talked to the teacher? Because if you haven't talked to the teacher, talking to the board member is
Protocol,
useless.
protocol.
Useless.
He has protocol in line.
I understood from my pre-call with Dr. P that
Protocol.
you all, that was not an issue. He's got that locked down, but that is how you continue to reduce your phone calls and still respect the public's ability to reach out to you as an official.
Absolutely.
You still can take a phone call.
Absolutely.
And this, I want to thank you for your presentation.
Yes.
But I do want to say that this board has come a long ways. And because of his leadership, Dr. Paluski, it has given us vital time. We don't have to deal with the issues. We don't have to deal with,
Yep.
we do our job. 2 things, hire and fire superintendent and create policies.
Yep.
So that's the line that we're
Yep.
on now.
Yep.
We're not trying to run the schools anymore.
Yep.
That's what he's hired for, and make sure that the academics of our students, so he's doing a good job. And
That's
it's
great.
really boring on the board now, no action.
That's
Isn't
great.
that wonderful?
That's how it's supposed to be, ma'am. And I think if you postmortem each one of your meetings and you say 80% of the time we are talking about student achievement or policy, those are good meetings.
Yeah.
Because that's really what it's all about.
Yeah.
And what you're holding them accountable for is not, is the coach any good? Are you changing the grass? What you're holding them accountable for is student achievement.
Yeah.
Are our test scores improving? And if they're not, tell the board your plan to improve them. Are graduation rates improving? If they're not, tell us how you're going to improve it. And do you need policy to help you do that? And if not, then go get them. Thank you all.
Well, thank you for
Yeah,
coming,
thank
but
you.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Walker?
I just also wanted to thank Ms. Ann, because anytime I've been confused about anything, give her 24 hours and I have an answer. And if she doesn't have the answer, she will direct me to where to get the answer. So thank you as well.
Thank you, Dr. Butcher, for not answering my question at the meeting yesterday.
God.
I'm not gonna ask what you asked.
Yeah.
I got the answer now, though. Thank you.
Are you still
catch you.
doing private security?
I do.
Okay, so, Dr. Paluski, we're just gonna say that out loud, that you're doing private security, and so you could come as a, co-host and possibly look through our school district and what we can improve, where and when if needed, right?
I'd be happy to do that. I'd make sure ethically it was all fine, but
Yep.
absolutely, it's what I do in my day job, like you all have a day job.
Yeah.
That's what I do. And if it's not a crazy enough world, the security world in this past year has been almost as challenging as education. But, you know, I don't want to end the meeting without saying, I think for the challenges we have, we just all have to remember, and I can't tell you how many times I say this in our board meeting, we are blessed to live where we do
Yes.
in Arkansas.
Yep.
I mean, there are big public school systems that have not, they don't know where their kids are since a year ago from now.
Yeah.
And we got our schools back open. We had to make some concessions, but y'all did that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not easy, but you did that,
Yeah.
and we've been blessed. So thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
Dr.
you.
Bishop.
Thank you so much. Give you a hand. Clap. 10 minutes over your time, but you all right. 10 minutes over your time. Yeah, 7:38. You were gonna do an hour and 30 minutes, remember?
I sat here and logged your hours on my iPad, so y'all got 'em.
Thank you for a
Thank you,
job
Dr.
well
Butcher.
done.
Thank you, Mr. White. Okay, our next item, which is,
Leadership training?
yes, this will be the 2001-2002 leadership training for principals and assistant principals. And I introduce to you my colleague, Dr. McGee.
Learning, training.
Yes.
Madam President, members of the board, tonight I'm coming to present to you an update for our leadership training to our principals and assistant principals, and we're calling it Moving from Management to Leadership. So this PD training. So our purpose tonight here, number one, we want to provide the professional development to our building principals and assistant principals as we try to build the capacity of their instructional leadership. We also want to increase the coaching conversation among the building principals and assistant principals and the teacher leaders and teachers themselves. But also want to continue to provide the professional training to our multi-classroom leaders, better known as MCLs, as regarding to the instructional leadership. So our PD, we're looking at going in and partnering with the Learning Collaborative. Dr. Fran Proman is the trainer. The dates is going to be July the 28th through May 27th, 2022. We will begin this journey in our Leadership Institute, which is this summer. There's going to be required training for our principals and assistant principals. We also have training for our MCLs, and it's going to be conducted in 2 different phases. I will tell you tonight, and I'm going to get ahead to it, we'll come back for an action item for the proposal for the second phase. So the Learning Collaborative will focus on the areas of, again, our building principals and assistant principals as becoming more instructional leaders, not moving away from management. So you can see here some of the things that we're going to focus on. One of the things that for sure we want to build that we believe is building the relationships, facilitating that trust and that collaboration, but also part of the coaching, giving the descriptive feedback, and not just giving it to them, but also asking and receiving, being able to look at the feedback, disaggregate the feedback, and move forward. Some of the other areas, again, we want to continue to observe the learning, be able to, again, having those coaching conversations, those skills, but also in building their capacity that they can be able to have those difficult conversations. And I'm not going to read all of them, just hitting more of the highlights. that they also be able to deal with the difficult personalities and situations. We want to make sure that we can build our capacity of our principals and assistant principals and all of our leaders. So again, some other background of the Learning Collaborative, the other areas of professional learning, women in leadership, transforming schools and cultures and systems, but the SEL, social and emotional learning, the mental health and wellness support. You guys remember that was an issue that we have here in the district, and we wanted to make sure that we continue to provide this support. One of the success rate that the Learning Collaborative has is 99%, and this is measured again by the clients that keep inviting the invitation for returning to do professional work. So the Learning Collaborative, 57 public school districts across the United States, 11 private schools, 37 international independent schools, 20 international educational partners, and 10 colleges and universities. So phase one, this is phase one of our program and our plan here for our PD. Principals and assistant principals, again, we begin this journey in July the 28th, July 29th, August the 6th, and August the 9th. 4 days at $3,500 per day, which come out to be $14,000. 35 books, Building Your Instructional Leadership, which come $1,505. And proposal one, that total proposal one is again 15,000, a little bit over 15,000. So that falls under our policy, which means the board doesn't have to approve, but we want to be transparent and bring it to the board. So this is why we're bringing phase one. Phase two is, again, I will bring back as an action item for our regular board meeting and ask the board to support this phase. Again, this is the principals training ongoing throughout the whole year of next year. October the 6th, December the 1st, February the 2nd, August the 6th. 4 days, again at $3,500 per day. We have already set aside something new for next year that we are going to do what we call leadership training for all principals throughout the whole year. We've already built those days into our calendar, set aside those calendar days. Also including our assistant principals, 2 days, $3,500 per day. That's going to be October 21st and February the 10th. Then Dr. Probman and her team will have site visits. We want 14 site visits at each of the sites, 2 visits per school. We want her to come on site, work with the principals and assistant principals, be able to model the coaching and the conversation, the feedback, be able to give that feedback to them as well. You see that the cost there, that's $3,500 per day, around $49,000. Again, a part of our plan again is to go to the MCLs, fall and the spring, 2 days, $3,500 per day, $7,000 here, a total of $77,000 for the professional development. That is what we're going to bring back as an action item to the regular board meeting. So our goals, again, we want to continue to build a capacity among our school leaders. Again, we want to continue to improve the instructional leadership, which ultimately will again move our student achievement, improve the student achievement within our schools. Again, we want to encourage our principals and assistant principals to use the coaching conversations. Part of that coaching conversation is being able to give the feedback. We call it coaching them up or coaching them out. So we want to use that model there. But then we'll continue to want to build a capacity among our MCLs, and which ultimately, again, will improve the student achievement. So the next steps in our timeline. Tonight, we're doing a presentation, phase one. Later this month, I'm going to finalize our schedule with the professional training with the Leadership Institute with Dr. Proman and our executive team and our Leadership Institute committee. And then May the 20th, again, we will come back and ask for approval for the board on the phase two. June 30th, we're going to try to finalize that training of phase two. We want all this to be planned out by the summer. And then, again, we'll start this journey on July the 28th. At our Leadership Institute, implementing phase one. In October, and when school start, we'll begin implementing phase two. So at that's it. Do you any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Dr. McGee, this Dr. Fran Proman, the trainer, is this a company or individual?
The Learning Collaborative is a company.
It's a company?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
Will it be mandatory for our principals and assistant principals?
Yes.
Yes.
It is required.
Yep.
100%.
Okay, that's great, because we're making summer school mandatory, so why not make this mandatory? So that's awesome, that's great.
So you are teaching principals, assistant principals, not just doing discipline, but they'll now be sort of like in an academic.
Yes.
Correct.
That's the whole
That's
shift.
the whole notion of
That's
all
the
of
whole
this.
purpose.
Yeah, the move them from management, that's manager. Being a manager, we need to become more instructional leaders. One of our philosophy that Dr. Paluski and myself, we agree that, and this is what I've seen this, having led several schools to turn around from my previous district. If you focus on instruction, the discipline going to go down.
We agree.
If you have the kids engaged inside their class, and the teachers are and administrators are there evaluating and questioning and engaging the students, and it's playing, you will the discipline and as one of my old pastors would say, I'm gonna say, I'm not telling you what I read, I'm telling you what I know because I've done it.
Right.
And if you focus on that it's being an instructional leader, keeping them engaged, the discipline will go down.
Agreed. How is this program different than the other two programs that we have participated in the past? So
And which
the,
would those
Yeah,
be?
the program that we,
Solution tree?
Or I think you're talking about the Leadership Academy.
okay, Leadership Academy, it does ring a bell to one of them.
ALA.
And then the second one was, we didn't implement it fully, in my opinion. It was a halfway point. We have a habit of that.
Are we
History.
talking about opportunity culture?
Well, we still do opportunity culture, don't we?
Yes, we do.
But it was only like halfway rolled out. I would agree with that statement. But that we won't argue, I promise.
Well, I think the biggest difference is this is just providing the professional development, the training.
Okay.
And we're going to provide the support, the on-site support
Okay.
with the principals. I know ALA done some with certain schools. All of our schools are going to get this. All of our leaders, principals and assistant principals, MCLs are going to get this training.
And I
then
think
what
I just-
happened- I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. What happened with the consultant that we brought in? We were working with a consultant prior also. The gentleman from Bentonville, he just referred to his name. Gwen? Was it Gwen that came in as a consultant? Was he with our teachers? Or was
Joe
he-
Quinn.
Joe, thank you.
Oh, Joe Quinn.
Yes. Thank you.
So we'll be working with Mr. Quinn in a different capacity around
Okay.
visioning, mission, core values, and
Okay.
the
Very good.
good memory, because that was a email quite a ways back about some of them. So yes,
Okay.
and he's going to support us with. I know he's done some work collected around strategic plan, so I've asked him to be a part of that too.
Okay.
As it's going to be one of my goals
Okay.
coming forward. But I also think to Dr. McGee's point, one of the things, and this goes back to the 100-day plan, as you know, is ensuring the consistency of training across the district.
Agreed.
There's been some things that have happened, but I don't think we've done it consistently so that we're all talking the same language across the district. I think that's unique. I think the other thing about the learning collaborative that will happen is we know right now our leaders are at different levels, and so it's almost like an individual support plan for them that's going to be developed. And that's why that individual coaching with Dr. Perlman to assess where their skills are and maybe where they need some gaps, maybe need to be filled. So I think that also sets it apart. But I'm very excited about, because it's going to be intense. I mean, it's going to be a very deep level of instructional leadership, and I think as I've talked to principals, they're looking for that.
Okay, good.
And not only that, we're getting feedback from the principals. When we bring them in right now together as a whole, they are enjoying that coming together, getting we meeting currently right now on Fridays.
Every Friday.
We just started meeting on Fridays from 8:30 to 10. But they are enjoying that piece of coming together as one, everybody hearing the same information, getting the same understanding, getting on the same page. So this is only going to move us up a notch in the right direction as we continue to look to improve our student achievement among all subgroups.
Oh, good point, Dr. McGee. I'm really glad you bring this information to us. But the MCL, you know, I mentioned this about 3 months ago, and Ms. Ratliff, you know, the thing got me is I saw $2 million for them. And that was, when I was wondering what they were doing. So now, since I see you with the training program, I can feel a little better. Because no matter way, I guess, in due season, I guess, how many MCLs did we have? And then, like Ms. Ratliff was so profound in her statement about the federal funding was paying for it, in which I thought that's okay, but I was just trying to figure out what are they paying for. But now, maybe we could have some accountability. This is what you're talking about.
Well, please be mindful, board members, that Dr. Paluski has already made this clear that this is still up I guess, observing mode, evaluating, evaluating opportunity culture to make a decision whether the effectiveness is this is going to be the right fit for North Little Rock School District. This is our way, in my opinion, to provide that support to that program as we continue to build capacity with the MCLs.
Okay. Thank you. Very good.
I'm a little confused. Are they being trained together or individually?
No,
The MCLs?
No, the principals. Because I thought you said,
So, yep, so in the summer, the principals and the assistant principals, we're all gonna be together. So they get 4 intense days. And then as we go through the school year, they'll be separated because we need, while the principals are out, we need the assistant principals running the building, vice versa. So that we're not, because one of the things I've learned is we might have both leaders out at one time. We can't have that. We need one in the building.
Right.
And always ensure that that happens. So,
and not only that, we have some calendar days built in for PD, so we can get the principals there training when school actually begins this fall. Then the other PD days, professional development days, we can focus on the assistant principal. So which may be a little smaller group. As I look at it as a smaller group. When you in the classroom, you do whole group, you do small groups. So now we're gonna have a whole group this summer before school start. Then we have small groups that we can really focus in more and make it intentional and personalize the learning to those leaders' needs to be able to build their capacity.
Very good.
All right, I've got 2 questions, and we kind of worked our way around to the first one, and it is this training, is it focused on opportunity culture? So or is it just general training? I mean, are we trying to, so answer
The
that one
first question, thank you for that question. No, it's not focused on opportunity culture. This is, again, our goal is to build the capacity of our leaders inside the classroom, including our MCLs, because in our mind, they are still leaders.
Okay, so the MCLs are part of this is because they're in the leadership pipeline.
Correct.
Not because of that structure.
Correct.
Okay, because, I mean, I know we have some champions for that, and I know we have some people that are concerned about opportunity culture, but I know that if we don't continue to train and try to provide support there, it won't work on its own. But we've got to make that a focus area if we're going that route. So the second question is this focused on, will there be any training in regards to continuity of our curriculum, specifically between the middle school and the high school? I've heard in the past, not so much recently, that it's like the English curriculum wasn't always aligned. Are we getting better? Are those better aligned now? The kids that went from 8th to 9th grade were almost starting over in their curriculum. Where are we on that?
That's a different, thank you for that question. That's a very good question, but I do think that's a different conversation.
Okay.
So that's gonna come with the curriculum audit.
Okay.
To make sure that we are aligned, our standards are aligned, and also that vertical and horizontal alignment is taking place within our own curriculum department. We are getting there.
Okay.
And I do want to say publicly that our teachers have done a marvelous job with our literacy curriculum, with the pacing guide, along with our math teachers. They have done well. But we still have some gaps and we have some holes to fill. I do believe the curriculum audit, would be the best served to make sure that specifically what you're talking about, Mr. Zakreski, that making sure that we are aligned, that we are not have any holes or gaps into our essential standards, and making sure that we're teaching preparing our kids.
But that's a culture. I mean, that's a discussion for another day.
That's coming later on.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and the only thing I wanted to add to that, Mr. Zakreski, the great questions, is I think the other thing is what we're learning, if I've asked, is like who's given the professional development to MCLs? And that has kind of somewhat remained a question. Some of it's been virtual because of, COVID. So I think this is another way for us to deepen our study of allowing the trainer to listen to them. What kind of training are they getting? How's it going on the job? So I think that will help us in our analysis of making a decision going forward. And then the second part of that, which you bring up a really good point, and I think it's going to take us a while to get to that pure alignment of the curriculum. And I think when we talk about the vision that I have for how to redesign some things, and from the 100-day transition plan, I think when we get the opportunity to build that entire division of curriculum instruction, you've got experts. That's their sole job, is to be able to align that curriculum. We're making some great strides. Our teachers are doing some great work, but that is definitely going to be a focus. It's going to take us a little while to get there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good job, Dr. McGee.
Good job.
Good job.
And you okay? We keep going?
Yep.
Okay.
We're good.
So the next information item that we have, I want to welcome Mrs. Maria Touchstone, our ESL and ESOL coordinator, to give a very just kind of quick overview of the EL Achieve for the ESOL program. And these are new curricular materials, so part of the boards will have to approve these at our next board meeting, along with her supervisor, Ms. Ratliff. Welcome, and I'll turn it over to you both.
First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this curriculum. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here sitting and advocating for the students in our school district that are our language minority students. The first slide simply shows you the purpose, and the purpose is to explain why we are requesting to use EL Achieve. EL Achieve is an English language development program that is fully supported by DESE and is being used in many school districts across Arkansas. It is something that we have never had in place in the North Little Rock School District, and we know that English language development is a critical piece in the journey to language acquisition. And therefore, the slide shows you that this is a DESE approved and recommended program. As a matter of fact, the directors at DESE call it the only true English language development program out there. And we're very, very excited because we are entering into a partnership with DESE, which brings with it funding for many of the items in the materials for the teachers. And it will establish the foundation for the growth that we need to see in our language minority populations. The second slide, and please let me share because there's someone on the board that I don't know, but this is year 33 for me, and I am an English language learner myself. I'm an immigrant from Mexico who came to the United States when I was 6 years old. And these are a few pieces of information about second language acquisition. Research shows that it takes between 7 to 11 years to attain full English proficiency, or proficiency in any second language. We know that the affective filter is a key part of the process. And if you are familiar with education theory, you know that the affective filter is simply that device that when a student feels safe, comfortable, and supported in the classroom, the affective filter opens up and they're able to receive instruction. English language learners many times enter the country and are in a period of shock, and we know that all of this is very important in the process. There are 4 domains of language that are measured. Comprehensible input is what the student is receiving. There is something called a silent period when a student enters a mainstream classroom and they have no English proficiency at all. The silent period is when they're receiving information and that input, but they may not be producing language. English language development addresses the domains of language acquisition, because the 4 domains are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And until they have progressed through listening and comprehension to speaking and production, they will never make it to reading and writing. And so we know that the English language development portion of the journey to proficiency is critical. And EL Achieve provides that for students, provides extensive training for teachers, and addresses the English proficiency levels that we're serving. We, in the past 2-3 years, many of the requirements at the state level in terms of second language acquisition programs have really been ramped up. And we now have to code into eSchool for every English language learner the type of Common Core access that we're providing for each of the students and the English language development program type. So it is critical to be able to provide a program like EL Achieve. For the first time ever, this slide gives you a little bit of the data. Our standards are called the ELPA 21 standards, and there are 3 levels of proficiency. Emerging, which may be a complete non-English speaking student. Progressing, which they've acquired some proficiency in some of the domains, and they're making growth. And proficient. And this is an opportunity to remind you that we have very strict exiting requirements for English language learners. So they have to progress through all the levels. And that slide just shows you the numbers for each of the proficiency domains from the test in 2020. The data for the past 4 years, the trend of proficiency supports the fact that we need an English language development program. As you know, Arkansas, until this last legislative session, has been one of 2 states that still had an English-only law in place. Arkansas and Arizona. This past legislative session, a bill was passed and became law that supports a district's right to allow the use of dual language programs to help these learners. And so now Arizona is standing alone with that English-only law in place. The data is there. It's black and white. It supports the fact that we need an English language development program. Once again, this is another slide showing the emerging, the progressing, and the proficient. That little sliver of green is proficient. And remember, they can't exit even if they score proficient on the assessment if they do not meet the other lengthy list of exiting requirements. So we have English language learners that may have tested proficient on the ELPA 21 summative assessment, but still cannot be exited. This is just a little information if you are not very familiar with the second language acquisition programs in the state. Everything is a requirement from DESE, including identification, assessment, the LPAC and the determination of program services, instruction, accommodations, monitoring, and the revision of the interventions or the accommodations that are being used with the students. The legal references for second language acquisition programs are listed on that little brochure. We have an extensive list of legal references that we must adhere to. And once again, this is a chart with the EL population by building. We want you to know that we have a building, Ridge Road Elementary, that is about 35% English language learners, and then we have a building where we may only have 10 students. So the difficulty in providing appropriate instruction at the building that is 35% ELs is a very challenging task but it's also equally as challenging in a building where there are only 10 students. And as a district, we've had tremendous support from the board as we have evolved with our program and our services for this population. The ESL program, for a long time, I started in 1998. I was the first certified ESL teacher the North Little Rock School District ever had. And yes, I was K-12 ESL, North Little Rock. We bused all elementary English language learners to one campus.
Wow.
And then I had to travel twice a week to the middle school and one day to the high school.
Yeah.
We had 24 kids district-wide. Today, our population fluctuates between 550 to 580 current English language learners, but now we have to track the language minority students, and that's over 700. So even for a district with a population that does not compare to Springdale and Rogers and Fort Smith, our population of English language learners is growing. And I'm just very excited that we have this possibility of getting this curriculum. That shows you the teachers that we have and their caseload. Remember that we have a teacher that goes to 3 different schools. And we have teachers that have caseloads of up to 50, 60 students. And the graphic on the opposite side of the slide shows you what an ESL teacher does. We have incredible, wonderful master teachers that love kids, and they do all of that. Parent liaison, teacher administrator support, program documentation, assessment and monitoring, instruction. They do it all. And so we're just very, we know that EL Achieve is a district commitment to a 30 to 45-minute block of instruction every day for every English language learner. And so that is a very, very serious commitment by the school district. And the curriculum there's a summary of what the curriculum will look like. It includes daily formative assessments and a weekly summative assessment. It includes that data that will be the base of the progress monitoring for the students. And I love the part where they told us that 80% of the interaction and the language that is used with the English language development program is by the students, so that they can develop that speaking and that listening domain, which lays the foundation and the groundwork for that growth into the reading and the writing domain. And we already have great literacy programs in the district. I know that was a lot of information. This is systematic ELD divided into those grade bands. We're constructing meaning for kids, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
I was going to say, can we show them the picture of
Yes, I wanted to show you this because, as I said, Arkansas has a timeline to proficiency for the first time ever in the history of the state of Arkansas. And there's a picture of Maria in 1999. And I wanted to show you this picture because all of those little people are adults.
Okay.
And we know what works.
Yep.
Following
Class of 2020.
the instruction, following the domains, the growth to proficiency. We have some college graduates in there. We have other kids that are not college graduates, but the right curriculum and trained teachers and trained administrators to make sure that those teachers are following the plan and implementing with fidelity. That is what all students deserve, not just English language learners.
Awesome.
Yes, Ms. Williams.
This question is directed to my friend here.
Yes, ma'am.
I always call everybody my friend when you do a good job, okay?
Okay.
I just wanted to know, about 8 months ago, we listed that. Ms. Touchstone, I see the teachers on this program here, and you got a teacher running to 3 schools. And I know that we got federal fundings now, and see, I see no equity in this as far as meeting the needs of all of our students. And I know you got some federal funded monies, and I was wondering, who pays, like for these ESOL students, where do these teachers' salaries come from?
They come from ESL funding, that we get ELL funding. It's out of a categorical, like we have ESA, which used to be in NSLA, and then we have ALE. Well, this is ELL funding, and we only receive right at $100,000 with ELL funding. That's all we receive.
But question, right there. If this is all you receive, what responsibility does the district have in hiring teachers for programs? Because otherwise, there's no equity in this.
Right, and so what we have done is we have hired more. This past year, we've hired 3 more teachers, and we had to transfer a lot more money from ESA, which is categorical, into ELL, and that's great. But we've come to a point now to where we have expensed all of our categorical funds right now, and so what's going to help us out is the ESSER funds that we have now to help support in the pieces where we're missing. And so that's where Dr. Paluski is charging us to look at the areas that we need to. That's why we want to bring this up, because we know those students need that teacher. And as Ms. Touchstone can speak on, with all the other curriculums that they have, it is hard to get in and to pull them, because you don't want to pull them out of certain subjects, but they have to have this 101, this kind of instruction to be able to be successful in all of the other core subjects.
Well, see, you said the magic word there, Ms. Ratliff. They need the one-on-one, but if the teachers aren't there, how are they going to get
Right.
the one-on-one dollar?
And that's why I just took over supervising ELL a year or 2 ago, and so when I came on board, I saw a lot of things, and so I've been trying as much as I can to help them. Funding has been an issue.
Okay,
but-
hold up for a minute.
Yes, ma'am.
Your point is clear, and I don't want to dwell on this all night.
Okay.
I asked about this 8 months ago. Since Dr. Paluski, he's been hired now, and he's in this position, perhaps now he can direct the path. You know,
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Bell should tell us, let the person who get paid do the job. So I'm switching this over to him as a recommendation.
Yes.
He can report back to the board to see how we can help the students, because I heard about your short funding, but then I heard about ESSA day before yesterday about how much money North Rock School District got. So maybe something, and they said for the education of all children, we got to make our money accountable. So I think with this program, this is certainly a top priority and high accountability. What you think, Ms.
Yes,
Redden?
ma'am.
Therefore, you don't have to discuss it anymore. That could be a long conversation. That would be just a recommendation I'm saying publicly to Dr. Paluski. It's something that I would like for the board to even consider, that we find the necessary teachers to meet the needs of all of our students. And thank you for the work that you do, and thank you, Ms. Touchstone, okay?
I totally agree with you, because when I sit in their meetings, those teachers are doing all they can, but they're stretched thin trying to meet all of them. And
We're gonna
so-
do better. The board
That's
will
right.
vote for, I'm sure the board, if we believe in equity, we're doing great things. We
But-
believe in equity for all students, not some students. So with that in mind, I appreciate you and your funding. I appreciate you, Ms. Touchstone, and your teachers, and contacting the parents and all of that. But that was just something that, when I heard about the ESSA money day before, yesterday, when we heard it, from the Arkansas School Board Association, all day long I sat and listened to all that money, 'cause The state got $1.3 billion, and the state only get 10% of that money, so the other money is going to district. But they told us the money has to be for students, show purpose, so they can see some growth.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all I got to say.
I do want to say one more thing about EL Achieve that I'm really excited about is the partnership with DESE, with ADE and DESE, because Maria and I were on a phone conference and Zoom call with Tricia Kerr, who's right there in the Title III division, and they said, Ms. Ratliff, Ms. Touchstone, we're doing this all for you. They are paying for all of the training. They are paying for all of our teacher kits.
Nice.
And so the curriculum for the students is coming out of, we use the rest of our Title III funds and the rest of our recent immigrant funds. We're only one of 3 schools that received recent immigrant funds. And so we have already purchased with what we had left in Title III and recent immigrant. We have the curriculum, and DESE's providing all the training and all the kits. And then they're going to continue. It's not just a training that's going to take place 2 days for teachers. There's also an administrative training. And I've already reached out to principals and assistant principals, and either a principal or an assistant principal has to be in that training so that they know and can recognize in the look fors for what the teachers will be doing. Then the teachers will have 2 days of training. Then in the fall, they'll come back and have a refresher, and then DESE with EL Achieve, and correct me, Ms. Touchstone, if I'm wrong, will continue to have ongoing PD in the spring and then another institute next summer. So this is not just a one-shot thing. This is something really deep that's really going to benefit the students of North Little Rock.
I love that.
It is ongoing and targeted professional development for the people that are opening the doors for these kids with that English language development curriculum.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
Maria, I just wanted to say that I know how much of a warrior and an advocate you've been for these kids for many years, and I thank you and I appreciate that, and this is a long time coming. This is going to be good for these kids.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. Anything else?
I do have a follow-up question, if you don't mind. So it's my understanding, so this department caseload here, they're fluent in Spanish, these individuals?
You're talking about the chart with the teachers and the students? The chart includes, there are 2 populations that we have to track.
Okay.
One is the language minority student population, which includes any student that has another language in the home, may have been an English language learner, but they're exited, and now we're required to monitor them for 4 years, or they're fully exited.
Okay.
So it includes all of them because by legal precedent, we have to provide support to the families even once the students exit.
Yes, which brings up my next case in point. We need more. So are we doing anything to help bring on teachers with not just Spanish, but any second language? Are we doing anything to partner with, and I'm going to say UCA because I know their #1 program is for teaching, so are we partnering with them to bring teachers to our district that we need?
We currently have 30 teachers and an administrator that have applied to attend the ESL Summit in the summer, which they will be certified once they complete that. So we are working on that. But that is a situation that is being faced all over the state.
Absolutely.
With the growing numbers.
Absolutely.
And that is definitely an area of need.
So again, I come back to homegrown. You know, the homegrown, do we not have our own students that we can kind of mentor and bring in and say, hey, have you thought about this? Or, hey, are you interested in this?
Yes, ma'am. If you remember last year, I believe, we recognized 4 students that entered in the elementary speaking no English at all, and they're all working on becoming teachers. So we're working on that, and if you're familiar with the legislative session, the DACA teachers bill that became law, that opened some doors, and the extended scholarship for students that are DACA students. Many of them are trying to be teachers, and they're fully bilingual and bicultural, and that's a beautiful thing also.
DACA helped a lot, thank God.
You're absolutely right. Those are all very, very important topics.
Okay, very good. Well, you can have anything you want, because my vote's yes, always for you. So, whatever.
Thank you, Ms. Wonka.
You can have
Thank
whatever you
you
want.
all.
Thank you both.
Very
Thank
good
you,
job.
Thank you.
Ms. West, what you saying, something?
The next item is, and I'll certainly turn it over to
You
Ms.
signed this
Ms.
sheet?
Temple for the,
Resolution?
yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Okay. Did everybody get a chance to read the resolution? Do we have any questions or any discussions before the next board meeting where we'll,
On the what?
on the resolution?
Oh,
No.
you don't want us to sign it tonight and hand it over?
I think we have to vote on it,
Yeah.
right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
So I've read it, and my only question is, are any procedures or is anything changing in the process of hiring people and the way HR handles anything? Is that changing, or this is simply a vote of support for the superintendent and the difficult work ahead?
Yeah, and I would, I guess I would say to that, Mr. Gresser, just off the top of my head, we'd still have to follow the process that is put in place in the policy. So for an example, if it's Fair Teacher Dismissal Act, we still have to follow the law, those kinds of things. That was kind of my first thought to your question.
Okay. But I mean, nothing functionally within the district is gonna change as far as, because I'll be honest, I've had a few people reach out to me and go, what is this? What's happening here? Because they're concerned that we are putting aside some of the protections for the district and the employees, and I just wanted to make sure that's not what's happening here. I mean,
I mean, there would have to be my understanding, in resolutions, in order to change the policy and a procedure, that would have to come before the board.
Right.
Okay,
I'm just
because
asking.
that would have to be specific. I don't believe you can just make a kind of a magic wand and say none of that applies.
Yeah, and that's how I understood it. I understood it, they would still have to follow procedures and law, and the personnel committees still do their thing, and nothing there changes. I just wanted to ask the question so folks felt more
Sure.
comfortable with
Sure.
what we're doing.
All we're saying is we're supporting his vision. Otherwise, the lawyer too had to look at this before anything, so we would not cross and don't get it.
Well, I understand that, but there were concerns voiced to me, and I just wanted to share those and just make sure
Supporting his vision.
that we're not doing anything, no funny business going on, I guess.
No funny business, but there was concern that when hard decisions came,
Mm-hmm.
that there may be some pushback, and this was a show of support that we know there's gonna be hard decisions coming, and they will be based on
Oh,
data
trust
and-
me, I
and-
lost a school board election because I voted for a hard decision. So I don't have any issue with hard decisions. I just wanted to voice those concerns.
I may agree with you in that statement here in just a few months. So we'll see how that rolls out. That hard decision.
Okay, well then,
And I mean, just to all that, I just want to thank the board for their support. That was very overwhelming to me, and I really appreciated the board's confidence in me and show of support in doing something like this. So
Right.
I just want to say thank you.
you're welcome, thank you.
Question, how do we sign this?
We'll sign it, at the next
At the
board meeting.
regular
We'll
meeting.
vote on it and sign it at
That's
the
what I
next
was
board
saying.
meeting.
We had an official sheet.
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Okay, so last but not least,
Yeah,
the
so.
budget workshop.
Yes, so we're, I know we've been working on our budget workshop, and we've been going through that. So tonight is a very, very modified, it will probably be like about 10 minutes. And I know, because I know we've had a long board meeting, and, but the only thing that I've asked Mr. Brown to share, and he's going to do it in probably in about 10 minutes, and, or 5, we'll get out of here by 8:30. But I wanted Mr. Brown to share our fiscal forecasting for FY22, to kind of give you an idea right now, where do we stand in our budget projections as we look at revenue coming in, student enrollment, what does it currently look like as we begin our process of working towards finalizing our FY22 budget. We want to just periodically keep you updated on what it looks like. So, Mr. Mr. Brown, I know you're gonna do this in 10 minutes, sir,
You have
and-
another
or
set?
less.
Small deficit.
It was all good. Next time, don't have so much on here.
Well,
No, it was fine.
there's some things we just had to
1
do.
hour and 30 minutes. That,
That was training,
that was a time killer.
Yeah,
but that counted as training, didn't it?
it did.
It did.
You did receive Ken.
Love.
Two quick sheets.
Okay, so yes, this will be a short
Yeah, we got
budget version, okay? So if, I just wanted to explain the process we use for projecting our, ending balance, each year. And then the process we go through to look and forecast, what the projections that we make for the next fiscal year. So if you'll look on I'd just like to walk you through maybe the first column, and then the procedure's the same all the way across, and then we'll talk about some of the areas that are highlighted. So if you'll look in the first column, that first highlighted number, the $12.85 million, that was our ending fiscal net legal balance last year. So that's our beginning point for this year. So that number is our beginning point, and then we look at, there's two different categories here. We look at the revenue section, and then we look at the expenditure sections, and then we track that throughout the year. We have projected numbers that we look at, but then we track actual numbers, and then we get to the end of the year where we have our net legal balance again that we deal with. So the 12.8 is sort of our, if you'll think about it, that's our zero line. That's where we like to compare. So if we say, if you hear me refer to a surplus, the surplus is the amount over 12.8 that we didn't spend, and the deficit spending that we would call would be the amount below 12.8 that we end up spending. So here what we're doing, we're just tracking this. So if you'll notice, what happens is we look at the local tax, that first line there, the local tax, other revenue, foundation funding, that's a line specific on our state aid notice, other state aid, other revenue, and then we have a total for revenue. So if you look in the month of July, we have a total revenue section of $4.6 million. If you look in the expense section, we look at the salary and benefits, and then we look at all other expenses, and then our debt service program. And so that totals up at the expenditure column there of $5.2 million. So if you look, the way that works, the math is the beginning balance of 12.85 plus the revenue of 4.6 minus the expenses 5.2, and the ending balance for the month of July is 12.1. So that tracks all through. So that 12.1 goes to the beginning of August, and that same process follows through. So we look at that. So if you'll notice at the top of July, August, September, October, all the way through April, the word actual. That means throughout the year we've adjusted these numbers. We've had projected numbers, but now we have actual numbers for those months. So those numbers there are set. And if you look at the months of May and June, above those is projected. Those months have not completed yet, and we're looking at past history, we're looking at expectations, conversations with the assessor's office, on tax collection. Is the economy strong? Are tax collections up? Are they down? So we use those conversations and that information to make the projections in May and June. So if you'll notice there, the highlighted numbers in May on the first line is tax, that 10.3 million. And the next one, the other local revenue, the 275,000, those are highlighted numbers. And then in the month of June, the 950,000 in tax, the 300,000 in other revenue, and then the last line there in revenue, 300,000. Those are all projected numbers. So I've highlighted those because those are the last variables in this year's fiscal budget that are still unknown. And, you know, we're waiting on those numbers to come in to finalize them. But what I've done here is just giving you a projection based on the last 2 years of historical data for those revenue and expenses. The same thing at the bottom for May and June, of course, expenses. We know what we have left in salary and fringe, but we also have other expenses that are outstanding that may have to happen at this point, so those numbers are not finalized. So what we've done is, if we carry this through, you'll see that our projected ending balance for June is 12.746. And in finance, when we're asked for a projection, I mean, what we do is we project revenue low and we project expenses high to make sure we give you what we think would be the worst possible scenario. If it comes in above that, then everything's even better. So what we're looking at here is if the tax revenues that we projected hold true, we're looking at a break-even situation. We're about 12.7 million, 12.8 was our benchmark. If the tax revenue comes in stronger, which I'm just on paper, I'm putting it here, I'm telling you, I think they're going to come in stronger, and I hope they do. But our projection right now for this fiscal year is that we sort of break even. We're going to meet that $12.8 million benchmark. So if you then look over at page number 2, we take that starting, you know, that becomes our fiscal year end balance becomes the beginning point for next year, and we look at what are the changes in revenue that we're anticipating and what are the changes in expenses that we're anticipating. And long-term, fiscal year 22, where do we see the district ending up? So what we're doing, I've just taken, and you all have been following some of the legislative changes that have happened. There's been changes in state foundation funding, categorical funding, all of those things. So I've sort of mapped out what the impact will be for us. And we're just looking big picture now. We're looking at the state foundation funding there on line 1. We're showing that will have an increase. They're actually increasing the amount per student. So we're going to expect an increase in state foundation funding because they're changing the amount per student. But if you'll also notice the line that says 3/4 ADM decrease, our funding is based on the number of students we have over a 3/4 average. And Dr. Paluski and I have sort of had that number out there in front of you to let you know all throughout the year we're trending in a decrease, and the decrease is 466 kids. So while we're getting an increase of 1.2, the loss of students is creating a $3.3 million deficit. So
I thought it was
the overall impact to the foundation funding is going to be less. What that does is that actually triggers declining enrollment funding for us. So what they're going to do is look at what is that declining enrollment, what's your drop in state foundation funding, and they will fund that at 50% for 2 years. It's sort of a safety net for schools. You have teachers contracted. You have to deal with staffing issues if that decline is permanent. So that declining enrollment is a safety net. So we're anticipating we'll get the declining enrollment. We also, if you'll notice that 770,000 decrease, where that was one-time money that we got this year to implement the new salary schedule that we implemented for this year. The state, they changed the law, said you had to change your teacher's salary schedules, minimum teacher salary schedules, but they gave you one-time money for implementation for that. And since we changed ours this year, we qualify for that money. We've got the money, but then that goes away for next year. So that's a decrease in revenue. Also, there's some increase and decreases, some smaller increases and decreases in revenue that you'll see there regarding the categoricals. They're changing the amount that they're funding for each of the categoricals, but we also, those students that we've lost are tied to our ESA funding. All of our categorical funding is tied to student ADM. So when our student enrollment declines, so do the categoricals that you're funded on. So while they're increasing the money, our student count's going down. So again, that translates into a net negative result for those categoricals. I'd also like to point out that last line down there that you'll notice that says bond refinance. So I've accounted for that as well. In the expenditure column, you'll see that there is a decrease in expenditure because we're going to be paying. If you recall, we're getting our savings from paying less. We're only making interest payments the first 4 years of our bond refinance. So the savings, the amount that we're paying less in our bonded debt payment is what we're taking to transfer to the building fund and transfer to operating for those operational savings. So I have put that on that one particular line. There's going to be a decrease in expenditures because we're paying less for our bonded debt. There's going to be an increase in expenditures, and that's because we're actually doing a transfer on the books. So the transfer looks like an expense, so there's going to be an increase in expense when we transfer to the building fund. But also we have an increase in revenue because we're going to hold $1 million back of that bond savings for the operational savings portion of that. So I've accounted for that as well in the revenue section. So when you look at the big picture and big projection of this, we're looking at roughly about a $630,000 deficit in loss in revenue and loss in expenditures. So it's going to be a little over a $500,000 impact next year. So the big picture of that is when I come to you in August and ask for your authorization to, if I come to you in August and ask for your authorization to transfer the excess of $12.8 million to the building fund, then that means we've ended this year in the positive, and the amount that we end will offset. So if, say I come to you and say we ended at $13.8 million, we're going to keep our net legal balance at $12.8 million. I'm going to ask you to transfer $1 million to our building fund. So that $1 million then will offset this $630,000 negative, and we'll actually be projecting a break even or a small surplus in next year. So again, all of this depends on tax collections that happen May and June. Dr. P, that's my short version of that.
I think this evening, having about a 3-hour board meeting, I think that's a good overview that will come back.
I just have one. How much is supposed to be in the kitty? What's our reserve amount that we have to keep in our budget? What's that magic number?
Well, what the district has set since 2011 is $12.8 million is our net legal balance.
Is that the fund bank?
No, ma'am.
No.
What is the fund bank money?
The building fund. The building fund money is,
Wait a minute, excuse me. Maybe I didn't ask the right question, Mr. Brown. There's there's a certain amount of money that a district has to have on the side at all times, so that the district could never go into now, what funding am I talking about on that?
That's the net legal balance.
That's
That
what-
is the
That's that
$12.8 million.
Okay.
However, I would say that ADE, does not have a minimum required for school districts.
It's not,
There is a maximum that's required by law. The maximum that your net legal balance can be is 20% of your net legal revenues. So the maximum we can have is 20% of our revenues. That's the maximum balance you can have. There is no minimum, and the minimum, and if you recall, that was one of the questions that audit had on our audit report, was
Right.
that they asked, did the district have a minimum fund balance policy?
Right.
Because there's no requirement from ADE, and the answer was no. But there was no negative impact on our audit because the state doesn't require a minimum balance or a minimum balance policy. But, I've opened that discussion with Dr. Paluski regarding that. We may end up bringing something to you for your consideration on that.
But-
There is no minimum balance that's required. However, when we were in fiscal distress years ago,
right,
the fiscal distress unit said, for a district your size, we recommend that you have a $12.8 million
that's what I'm saying.
balance. So
But-
they recommended it, and that's what we've been keeping.
And what, now, so the board, we have no board member on here, Ms. Wade, so you can understand. What is the purpose of having the net legal balance? Would you explain that?
Yes, so there are funds that are characterized as teacher salary fund, operational fund, debt service fund. Those are funds 1, 2, and 4. That's what makes up your net legal balance, minus the categoricals, which is minor in that big pool of things. But you cannot use it, what that does, the net legal balance prohibits school districts from using federal funds to prop you up.
Okay,
Okay, the federal funds are in Fund 6 and Fund 8. Fund 8's our child nutrition. Fund 6 are all the funds that run through Ms. Ratliff's office. They don't let you use federal funds to prop you up. So what they make you do is strip away all the federal funds, and your net legal balance is a true picture of your teacher salary fund, your operational fund, and your debt service.
okay. So, but in the old day, they used to say, keep you from being in debt.
Yes.
That it lets you know the what is that, the word? The sovereignty of your district when you can look at the legal
Yes.
balance.
And your debt service money, our building fund money, is not a part of that net legal balance. So
Okay.
when we say, when we say $12.8 million is what we like to keep, but you look at your board report and you see that there's $18 million in the building fund is separate. It's not a part of that net legal balance.
Okay.
They only look at teacher salary, operation, debt service. And that's a standard way to compare all districts across the state, and it's a way to take the federal funds out of the picture.
Okay. Good shot.
I have two questions. First one is, over here on the bottom right-hand corner, you have this ADE bonus of $439,000. What is that?
So ADE, last year was the first year. National Board Certified Teachers receive a stipend from us in district for having that National Board certification. ADE also pays a bonus. The state has been paying that bonus directly to teachers and not routing that through the school.
Okay.
The state went through an IRS audit 2 years ago, and the IRS says you no longer can pay it directly to the teacher because teacher retirement and all the payroll taxes were not being taken out. They were mailing it directly to the teachers with a 1099 form.
Okay.
And the payroll taxes weren't coming out. So now ADE has to send us a check that we turn around and process payroll for the teachers.
So we're just a pass-through for
We're
that
a
money?
pass-through.
Okay, all right. So it's really not money to, it's bonus money. Okay.
Correct.
The other
And I
question.
was just compensating our revenue for that.
Right.
Because it's pass-through money, it's not really revenue.
I understand. The other question I have is, with the legislature passing the law that's targeting increasing median teacher salaries, will that impact us or not? Or do we're already above that, I assume?
Unfortunately, it will not.
Well, I'm glad we're above that for
Yeah.
our teachers, but,
If they keep the median salary, the average salary, benchmark, where it currently is proposed, it will not affect us, because we're above that already.
okay. And it's just a step, right? You either get it or you don't. It's not a, okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Brown, I just may suggest on the, to Ms. Williams' question, that might be a really good weekly board report of just maybe explaining that a little bit. Yes, sir. And like where the building fund and all that, where we've got to have the 12-point, that would be helpful.
Yes.
And I do recommend that we do have a policy about, I know that was recommended, we might not have it, the AD might not require it, but I think that's good practice that we should have.
So I've sent you some information for your review. So, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Ms. Ratliff for hanging in there.
So I guess we call that evening. Is there anything else?
That's enough.
That's enough for one night. Yeah, I can go let my dogs out. Thank you all. What's that? Yeah, it's been a little challenging.